Okay, it's 7:04. I would open tonight's Board of Selectmen meeting of Tuesday, September 1st, 2020. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded. Unfortunately, because of technical difficulties, it is not being broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel or Facebook Live. Town of Lunenburg, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, is currently following the guidance from the Lunenburg Board of Health, Massachusetts Department of Public Health, and the CDC regarding the virus and steps communities can take to prevent its spread. Town facilities are open during limited hours, and you can make appointments outside of the appointed hours. In accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30, Section 20, all public meetings are being conducted remotely. This meeting, again, would normally be broadcast live, although because of technical difficulties, as I said, will not be broadcast live tonight, but you will be able to find it tomorrow. It is being recorded and it will be posted on the Lunenburg Access YouTube channel within 24 hours of its conclusion. If you would like to participate in this meeting from a computer, smartphone, iPad, or any other device, smart device, please download the Zoom application, and we are webinar ID 909-174-0347. If you do not have a smart device available to you, you can join by telephone by dialing 1-888-475-4499, and again, the webinar ID is 909-174-0347. Participants wishing to speak, if you are on the application, please use and familiarize yourself where the raise my hand function is. If you are a telephone user, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. I will see the hands raised and I will call on people as they raise their hand and as appropriate. Okay, roll call vote to make sure everybody's here. Ms. Adams.
Here.
Mr. Dwyer.
Present.
Mr. Marino.
Present.
Mr. Jeffries.
Present.
And I am present. Madam Town Manager, you are here as well.
Yes.
Okay. So we will have Ms. Adams lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to start whenever she is ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start. Any public comment from the board this evening?
I have one.
Go ahead, Ms. Adams.
Okay, I just, can make it a same sentiment again next week, but I know all the teachers started yesterday. Typically, we would be starting school this week, but it'll roll out over the next couple of weeks. So regardless of, people's personal feelings of what should or shouldn't happen, I know everybody's impacted and ready for a very different kind of fall. And so I just want to wish the school, students, families, everyone luck in transitioning into a very different type of beginning of a year. I think everybody will have a difficult time. If you're in one cohort or another, you may not see your close friends. And so there's a lot going on. I just wanted to say that my thoughts and mind are with everybody as we all start.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the board? Any public comment from the public? Seeing none. Okay. Any announcements? Madam Town Manager.
Yes, I have one or two. Quickly, because we're going to discuss the town charter later on in the agenda, but I do want to make it, just make an announcement that there was an error printed in the Sentinel, and when it became known to me, I contacted the reporter who corrected that misprint. And it was regarding the town clerk's position being changed from an elected to appointed. So obviously that caused some alarm because that's not what was voted. So that correction should have been made by the Sentinel. The other announcement is from Acting Chief of Police, Tom Gamble. Dear Ms. Lemieux, we have received several speeding and traffic complaints for Highland Street. With the anticipation of increased pedestrian traffic, and to help resolve this issue, we will be posting the road at 25 miles an hour, which is in accordance with the acceptance of General Law, Chapter 90, Section 17. The road will be posted in the thickly settled area between the Chestnut Street intersection to approximately number 285 Highland Street. The DPW director will post the road once he has the signs. And inclusive of this letter is a copy of the general law that was accepted at the annual town meeting in 2017.
Thank you. Okay, appointments 7:05. Fiscal year 2020 fourth quarter financial report from the finance director, Ms. Brochu. And are you? Karen, can you hear us? I think you're muted. I don't have an unmute button for you. Doesn't look like you're connected on audio. I just have a video for you. Okay. This is usually where we have the interlude music. I think she's going to rejoin. I think when she joined on her app, she didn't connect with audio, just with video. To the board, you should have this report in your in our drive. Uh-oh. Karen, if you can hear me, you could probably just call in on a phone as well.
I got a message from her that she's trying to connect. She apologizes. Her computer is running an upgrade right now. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, while she's doing that, let's switch this up. Let's go to the interviews while we go this. So we have some people who are here to be interviewed for either appointments or reappointments to certain bodies. And I'll just call them in the order that they're here. So we have for ZBA Associate and Architectural Preservation District Commission, we have Anthony Nicastro. I'm going to unmute Mr. Nicastro. Okay,
here,
Mr. Nicastro, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you are applying to two positions, a twofer here.
Yes, sir. I want to serve the town.
I appreciate that. We appreciate you volunteering. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sir, I've been here for 10 years when I retired from the Army. I spent 23 years in the Army. And I love being a resident of Lunenburg. I want to serve. I want to help. I want to do my part for the town instead of being one of those people who sit back and always complain about how things are run, how I just want to help. I want to do my part.
Sure.
And
So,
I love this town. This is a great place to live.
so I see in your talent bank form, you actually had 5 selections. So just talk to me about what you know about the zoning board or the architectural preservation district that attracts you to those two, since those are the two you're interviewing for here tonight.
Well, the zoning board has to do with growth. I love to see the town grow. More revenue, more money, make the town prosper. But on the other hand, the architectural commission, I want to preserve our past, right? Because you always, when something's gone, we say shoulda, coulda, woulda. We should have preserved that. So it's a balance of both, new and old. You got to meld them all together and make the town a great place.
Okay. Have you met with both of these boards, by the way? Both the
I
ZBA
talked with the chairman today on the phone
of both of them?
of the zoning board. Yes, sir.
Okay. And how about the APDC?
I talked with him via email, and
Okay.
we had a brief discussion via email.
Okay. I would open it up to the board if board has any questions for Mr. Nicastro.
I just say thank you.
I'd like to say thank you for letting me serve.
Any other?
Yes. So, Mr. Nicastro, first, I also want to thank you. You know, what prompted me to join, to get involved in town politics, I was also at the end of my career in the Army. So, as a veteran to a veteran, certainly I understand the commitment. I value it and appreciate your offer to continue to serve our country, our communities, and the capacity that you're choosing to. My question for you tonight is related to your military experience. Would you mind just expanding upon what your either duties were in different roles you've been in, and or specialized training you've received as an MOS as it relates to facilities, buildings, facility management?
Well, sir, my MOS in the military was, I had multiple MOSs. My last one I retired from was a supply NCO.
Okay.
Most of my experience from facilities and regulations have come from my positions outside the military, where I managed a meatpacking plant in Boston, Massachusetts, and a food processing plant in Wilmington, Massachusetts. So I had to deal with regulations, meaning town codes, fire codes, and all that stuff. I learned a lot from buildings and how they operate by reading regulations and just asking questions. So
I appreciate that answer. You know, you mentioning your experience as a supply NCO, I know that for those of us on the call who don't have military experience, that's a really critical role in every unit. You know, they go through every 18 months. You know, one of the things that they do is they manage how we're storing arms, ammunition, explosives. Every 18 months, they go through an inspection. I was a physical security officer, and so I know I worked very intimately with supply NCOs to ensure that military equipment was maintained in the proper way, usually millions of dollars worth of stuff that supply NCOs are responsible for. Certainly you have to be familiarized with the variety of regulations that you know, military is common for not putting in a role where you don't necessarily have the experience, but you certainly have the ability. So I certainly commend Mr. Nicastro for his volunteerism today, and certainly will be happy to make this motion to appoint him.
thank you, sir.
Ms. Adams?
I was just going to make a motion if we need to do the formal words. If Michael Ray would like to, that's fine. But I have it here, I can read it. I was going to make a motion for, do you want to do it, Michael? It doesn't matter to me.
You can go ahead, select
Okay.
round.
And make a motion to appoint Anthony Nicastro of 88 Whalum Road to as a ZBA associate and to the Architectural Preservation District Commission. And both of those have a term that expires June 30th, 2023.
Actually, I think one of the terms is actually inaccurate. I think one of the ZBA term, I think, is less. Is that correct, Madam Town Manager?
Yes, 2022 for the ZBA
Right,
associate.
so
Same day.
same day, yes, but a year earlier. So
And that
ZBA
was-
would be to 22, and the APDC would be till 2023.
Okay, so I amend the motion to reflect that edit of the
Second.
ZBA associate term to expire June 30th, 2022.
Excellent.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Ms. Adams?
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer?
Aye.
Mr. Marino?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
And an aye for me. Thank you, Mr. DeCastro. Good luck. You will need to go to the town clerk to get sworn in for both of those positions at your earliest convenience, and certainly before the next meeting of either of those two bodies.
Yes, sir, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for serving.
Thank you.
Good night. Okay. Let's just continue with, let's do the appointments and we'll just switch these up. So APDC member at large, Cullen Dwyer of 76 Main Street. Cullen, I am unmuting you. Okay, Mr. Dwyer, I believe that you were on this and your reappointment form didn't get to us. Is that correct?
I let it expire. I didn't realize my term was up.
Okay.
And I also let my term expire for the Historic Commission. I've decided to let that lapse and reapply to the APDC. Previously, I was the Historic Commission's representative to the APDC. So now, in this case, I will be a member at large.
Excellent. So for those all of us who know you need no introduction, but for those who are learning about you for the first time, just if you would give a little bit about yourself and your experience on the APDC already.
Yes, I started out as a Historic Commission member. The Historic Commission originally drafted the APDC bylaw and it introduced it into law. It was passed at town meeting. And at that point, I also joined the APDC, that's the Architectural Preservation District Commission. So it's a separate historical commission devoted to preserving historical architecture in the downtown area. There's in the APDC, the APD, which is the Architectural Preservation District. So I served on that board for, I believe, 4 years. I'm not sure now. And helped draft the guidelines for that commission, so that that would explain how the APD bylaw would be implemented. So I've been intimately connected with this board from the beginning, and wish to continue serving.
Excellent. Any questions from the board for Mr. Dwyer? No relation to our Selectman Dwyer, are you?
Unfortunately, no.
Wow, very well done. Smooth. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'll entertain a motion on Mr. Dwyer's request to be appointed appointed reappointment to the APDC as a member at large.
So moved.
I think we need the full motion.
I move to appoint Cullen Dwyer to the Architectural Preservation District Commission with his term ending, is it a 3-year term?
Yeah, yes,
So that would be June 30th, 2023.
that's correct. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor, Ms. Adams,
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer,
Aye.
Mr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries,
Aye.
and an aye for me. Congratulations. Keep doing the good work, Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. All right, we speak of the Historical Commission, and we have two. So let's see, I have 5 callers in here, so now I don't know because callers can't put their names in. So we're looking for Jennifer Sanderson. If Jennifer Sanderson is on here, there's okay. Thank you for using the phone. Raise your hand. Can you? Trying to unmute you. Zoom is not the most responsive application. Are you muted somehow on your side here, Ms. Sanderson? Because I cannot. unmute you. Does anybody know the Zoom phone command for unmuting?
I don't know, Tom, but can you unmute all as a potential way to resolve it?
Well, if they're muted themselves, even that won't work because you can privately mute yourself.
Okay.
Ms. Anderson, can you raise your hand again by *9ing? Okay, I'm trying to unmute the right person. Madam Town Manager, are you looking it up? Mr. McCarthy, hold on, let me.
I think it's *6 on the phone.
6.
Yep.
Ms. Anderson, you can try *6, please. I can see what kind of night this is becoming here already. I cannot unmute you, Ms. Anderson. You may have to dial back in and I'll look for your number. That's what I would ask you to do. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Bosom, if you could raise your hand with a *9 if you're on a phone. I see no raised hand. Is Mr. Kevin Bosom on the phone? No. Well. Okay. The technology is working swimmingly. Sandra. And I'm gonna let Jennifer Sanderson dial back in here, and we'll jump right to her. One more try with Kevin Boson. And if you joined again, Jennifer, I don't see your phone number. So if you joined in another way, please let me know. Nope, no one yet. Okay, so we can talk about Mr. Bosom in his absence here. He is a college student studying media communications at Fitchburg State. He's a Lunenburg High School grad. He's been a videographer for Lunenburg Access, and he's previously volunteered at the Historic Society, and he is looking to be appointed to the Historical Commission. I don't know if anybody on the board knows him. I do not myself. So we can either wait to see if we can get him. Madam Town Manager, was he? Hold on, you've muted yourself too. Was he confirmed to appear tonight?
I believe so.
So we can either appoint him or wait till we get another appointment and have him come in next week?
I'd
I would
prefer
leave it
to
up
wait.
to the board.
I'd prefer to wait a week for him to come back unless he joins the call later today.
All right, so I think that's probably a good idea. And I don't know, is Jennifer Sanderson joined the call again here? Ms. Adams? Ms. Adams?
It was just that I was muted and couldn't come back in.
Okay. All right. I guess Miss Sanderson did not come back in with a phone, so. If either of those two come back, we will come back to them. So let's go back to Karen. Karen, are you on the phone now? If you're on a phone, do *9 on that phone so I can try to unmute you. What in the world is going on tonight? Now she just dropped off again. And
She's saying it's not working.
I am slowly losing my patience with this tonight. Okay. Plus my own team keeps muting themselves and then I have to find them again. All right. What else do we got here? Because I'm not going to sit around doing nothing. So discussion on the town charter and the Parks Commission. So I'll turn it over to you, Madam Town Manager.
Do you want to go to the 7:30 appointment with the school?
So
and
the
the bus?
7:30 appointment, that's a great idea. So this is the meeting with the school and school transportation companies to discuss FY 2020 school transportation payment requests. Earlier this summer, we heard from the school business manager, Mr. Cassidy, who I think is on here, yes, and the superintendent, and I don't know who else is involved in this discussion. If you let me know by raising your hand here, I will unmute you. Okay, I see you're raising your hand on the video, so let's say that suffices, even though I meant raise your hand in the app because that's where I'm looking. All right, so I know Mr. Cassidy will want to speak. There, you're unmuted. Superintendent Burnham is unmuted. Okay, I don't know who wants to, is there anybody else? Okay, I see somebody who I don't have a name to. Who is the nameless person who is waving to me?
Mr. Van Dyke.
There was a Cor Van Dyk.
Yep.
Is he gonna, okay, there's another woman who's raising her hand.
Lisa Altericio.
Okay, why doesn't her name appear on her screen there? Okay. Thank you.
And Sandra.
And Sandra. All right. Is there anybody else that is part of this initial discussion? I know other people may want to speak, so. Okay, I will start with whoever is going to kick us off here. We can start out by where last we left is where we were made with a request to pay certain expenses. I think up to 50% of what we owed. Is that a correct number, approximately?
Cor, is that the correct number?
It's close. I could walk you through the numbers. It isn't, it depends on which period we're talking about. Heather, do you want me to just walk through your questions or
Yeah,
how do you
I
want me
can give
to address this?
Sure.
So everybody who's unmuted, first of all, so I'm going to ask individually. I know Mr. Cassidy is the school business manager, obviously the superintendent Burnham. Mr. Van Dyke, who are you with? And
Yes, I'm the Chief Financial Officer of Vanpool Transportation.
okay, Mr. McCarthy,
I am the CEO of NRT and Vanpool Transportation.
Miss Altarizio,
I'm the Vice President of Operations for Vanpool and NRT.
and Sandra, I don't have a last name.
Martin, D-Bus Service owner.
Oh, okay. Okay, so now we know everybody. So whoever wants to start from whatever side, this is being presented to us. So I guess I'll let you guys decide how you want to do this.
So I don't know if the school wants to speak and start, or we can certainly start from the position, from a position of vendor. I know Sandra would be, representing yellow school buses at this point in time. We're representing special needs transportation. So, Mr. Cassidy, do you want to start, or do you want me to go right into it?
If I may, Mr. Chairperson, let me just give you a summary of where what was presented to the school committee back in June. And back in June is the school committee voted the authorization of a payment to our two transportation companies to cover some of their operating expenses during the closure period. So this was granted under a legislative bill that allowed us to negotiate and to provide a payment for the really just continuation of service and just really to support the operations, even though there were the transportation of students wasn't happening. So this was like I mentioned at the last time I spoke. I've never seen anything like this in 30 years. This obviously we've never seen anything like this pandemic at all. So this is a legislative order, or I don't even want to call it an order, but it's not a mandate, but it's allowing districts to pay. Part of that process is having the school committee approve it and the Board of Selectmen to review and approve it as well. So in June, the school committee was presented with two amounts. The first amount was to D-Bus. Now, D-Bus is our big school bus company. And the payment that was presented to the school committee was a payment of $94,000. Our Vanpool Transportation is our special needs student transportation. And we were using the same model that we had negotiated with D-Bus to provide a payment to Vanpool, and that payment was $41,121. So just to give you some background information on where this is with the state, when I say the state, I mean the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education was really encouraging districts to negotiate payments with these bus companies to make sure that they were up and running for this school year. So, this has a lot of support at the state level, and it has a lot of support in some of the other districts that these two vendors support as well. I'll say it again. I know, I'm not, we're Lunenburg and we're not other districts, and, we make decisions on what's best for the residents of Lunenburg. But I will say, for example, that out of the 13 districts that D-Bus does transport, all of those districts have paid except for Lunenburg, and I just want to bring that to your attention. And I know to my knowledge, and I don't have a percentage or number of districts because I know Van Pool is, and I'll let Mr. McCarthy let it, if during his speech, kind of give some feedback on the number of districts that have paid to some level for Van Pool during the closure period as well. So that's during that meeting. I think there was some debate among the Board of Selectmen. There were a lot of questions that I couldn't answer. In between the town manager and myself, we alerted the two bus companies that they were welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for some additional questions. And I believe the town manager did have some other conversations with him as well. So that is how we've gotten to this point. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to you for the next level of conversation.
Okay, so I'm more than interested in hearing what people have to say about this at the last meeting. Basically, I'll summarize. I think obviously my whole board is here and they can communicate for themselves, but I think the summary of that meeting was, explain to us why we should be paying for services that were not done, not at any fault of yours, but not through any fault of ours either. So I think that was the question that generally people had. So, Madam Town Manager.
Yes, just to expand on that, I can, because there were a number of questions that came out at the last Board of Selectmen's meeting on this topic. So some of the questions that were relayed to both Van Pool and D-Bus were requesting details relative to the grants or loans or other stimulus funds that they received to offset their expenses, to provide a breakdown of the expenses related to their contract specifically to Lunenburg, and to show a balance sheet essentially as far as where those any deductions for loans or stimulus payments came from. Also, how many of the school districts had paid a negotiated amount and how many of those districts had not agreed to a negotiated amount, and how does this balance against the costs incurred during that time period? Whether the town, if they did agree to pay this amount, what type of assurances did the town have that the companies will continue to provide services, because that was a main concern, as well as what was the impact of not paying this amount on the financial stability of those companies, of Van Pool and D-Bus.
Thank you. We're going to look for presentations. I have two members that have their hands up. Are you asking questions before people present, or I'll ask Ms. Adams, you have your hand up here.
Oh, sure. I didn't know when you said you were looking for input and starting to summarize, I was prepared to give a summary of my thoughts, but I don't mind doing that after the presentations, so I can wait.
Mr. Jeffries?
No, I have a question. For D-Bus service, just so I can better follow along, I don't recall seeing much of a response from them. Is there more documentation provided that maybe I don't see? I see a letter that came through today that was really brief, but I have some questions on. But was there any other documentation that was provided in response to our questions? Madam Town Manager, perhaps?
Oh, okay, go ahead, Heather.
So all the materials that are in the Google Drive is what was sent through the school business manager to myself, which you have, as well as the document that was received today.
Okay.
There was also previous letters that were mailed out to Michael and Kate, previous probably June, July, with regards to documentation, not exactly for the balance sheet, but for other costs and such.
Which I understand that we had. Mr. Cassidy did most of the questions that we had, which is why we rescheduled this tonight. Did you receive any other documentation from D-Bus service? I just want to make sure I'm following along here tonight.
I did not. I did survey some of the other business managers. I think there was a question, and I apologize, which select person had asked, and it may have been shared in the Google Drive, which is why the other local governments paid. And it was just both companies were ready to go. They were on standby during this entire process. And looking back on it now, they obviously we weren't going to go back to school, right? We were in the middle of a pandemic, but just remember, at the end of March, we were thinking we were going to come back, and then we thought we were coming back in the end of April. And then I think ultimately we ended up canceling it at some point at the end of April, but these two companies were ready to go. So, but to answer your question, no, I had not received any additional information from the company or companies. But
Okay, so I'll start with Vanpool, and just in no order. They seem to, Mr. Van Dyk or Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, thanks for letting us speak. So again, I'm willing to answer any questions. Out of the 170 customers that we have, we collected from 99% of them. And what I mean by that is that we were able to come to an agreement. It was a long process when this hit. Governor Baker ordered the schools to be closed on March 13th. I spoke to Commissioner O'Reilly. I was also on that board for the folks and get ready to go back to school. Just so you know, I was part of that team. There was 26 of us on that board. We thought, and so didn't the rest of the state, we thought we were going to go back on May 4th. We did not lay off or furlough any people. We kept them on. For one reason and one reason only. We knew if we furloughed some folks, we would have a hard time retaining those folks to come back. Even after the 4th, even though they called school, we knew that there would be a challenge. We didn't know what June was going to bring. So again, knowing the stimulus package with the $600, if we let those folks go right away, we knew that we were going to have a challenge getting those folks back. Governor Baker got on TV, and on April 26th, he made that decision about May 4th. In the meantime, we talk about, for services not delivered. I heard that comment. And I don't want to put this on such simple terms, but there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes other than just driving that van. And what I mean by that, I want to use a reference of a restaurant, right? When you order something from a waitress and she comes out and she puts it down on your table and it's cooked, she didn't make that happen. What she did is she went back in the kitchen, the cook prepared that food, and then she brought it out to you. And that's kind of what goes on in the scenes, behind the scenes of school busing. We have terminals that we have to pay for. We have to pay those rents. We have vehicles and notes that we have to pay for. We covered the salaries of these drivers during that time in case Lunenburg and any other city or town went back to school. In the course of that time, there were some communities that stepped right up and said, hey, we understand the situation and we're going to make sure that we take care of that. We want to make sure our kids have safe transportation when we go back to school, believing that transportation really is a foundation of education, right? That's just kind of how we've set our system up. A lot of parents just can't get kids to school, especially in our high density areas. So we've come up that school busing is a form of education, right? They're on there for 15 to, depending on what it is, whether it's a special needs van or a regular school bus, they could be on there from 20 minutes to an hour a day. And those folks that we get to drive those vans, I just can't, go to Sam and Joe's and ask somebody if they want to drive. They got to go through a Corey, a SORI, and then they got to take a test, right? And that test, consists of some questions so that we know that the person that's sitting behind the wheel of that vehicle and the monitor that's sitting next to that child is of the best qualities, that they've had no incidences, that they're safe to work around children. All that costs money. The insurances, all that stuff costs money. And I understand when we turn around and we look at contracts, and I think Sandra's going to say the same as I do, we look at it based on 180 days. One thing that Mr. Cassidy said, we've never seen anything like this. We look at ourselves as no different than teachers, janitors, cafeteria workers. So when in the course of the time from March to April, we had an attorney that was appointed by many communities to come in and investigate us, not investigate us, but just look at our records. And we're an S corp at the time. The one thing they wanted to do is see our tax returns. Not only did Peter McNulty, the attorney that represented 13 of our districts, look at our corporate, he also looked at my personal tax returns, and then was able to form an opinion that based on the numbers that he saw, and I'd be more than happy to give you Peter McNulty's number or information, but based on the numbers he saw, he felt that what we were asking for was within reason. Not only within reason, it was based on fact and correct accounting. I got Cor Van Dyk to my right. I can certainly give you the lineup and all the information that you need on a numbers perspective. But again, the fee that we were looking for was for readiness of services. And again, we've been standing ready, not only since March, we've gone through 3 state inspections to make sure that those vehicles are up and ready for when you guys go back to school. This all needs, mechanics and, drivers to move those vehicles around, dispatchers to do the routing that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that those kids, get the education that they need, and we provide that transportation for those folks. So, Mr. Van Dyk, if you want to follow up with some numbers, that would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
And Heather, thank you for your list of questions. I think we did a pretty good job of answering them in the greatest detail we could reasonable to get ready for this meeting. And like John said, at the heart of what we do is getting your kids safely to school. And when we think back to March, the closure was first for 2 weeks, and then for 4 weeks, and then it was closed for the rest of the year. But at the beginning, we chose to continue to pay all of our drivers and monitors so that we could stand ready and have those same drivers to be in those vehicles when school would return. And just because the final act of transportation didn't happen, we continued to run the business as we always had. We paid the entire workforce. A lot of them stayed home. For that, by the way, we were able to earn an employee retention credit. And that's a provision of the CARES Act that was signed into law on March 27th. Part of that is just a deferral of some taxes, but part of it is a true credit. And we were able to credit that amount against your bill. The amount that we were able to collect under that tax credit was $18,969. In terms of, if you look at our financial statements and so forth, our largest line is labor, and we continue to pay all of our employees, drivers and monitors, mechanics, transportation coordinators, operations managers, and all the support personnel that work in our terminals. I think for Lunenburg, I'm not sure, Lisa, if we did any meal delivery, but we had, even though we were closed, we did have some fuel expense because in many of our districts we did meal delivery and laptop delivery. I'm just not sure off the top of my head if we did any of that for Lunenburg. In terms of maintenance, we continue to maintain all of our equipment, the regular preventative maintenance, the licensing and the registration and the state inspections, which we continue to do. And we also continue to pay our excise taxes. In terms of our insurance, the auto insurance, we were able to cut some of that expense, and we did pass that credit along to you as well. But in terms of the general liability and some of the access layers and the abuse and molestation coverages that we carry, we were not able to get any savings there. And those fixed costs that we continue to pay. In terms of our rent and utilities, we continue to pay all of those vendors that own our facilities and the utility companies. In terms of our overhead costs, in terms of IT hardware and software, the systems that really allow us to work efficiently for you, we continue to pay those costs along with our payroll service and our audit and our tax bills. And also, of course, our vehicles. We owe a lot of money on our vehicles, and we continue to pay the principal and the interest on those every month. When we look at all of our costs and what we could save, in addition to the employee retention credit, we did pass those along. We would have invoiced you from March 13th through the natural end of the school year. We would have invoiced you with the student count that we had at the time of closure, around $82,000. The discounts that we passed along to you amounted to $18,000, so we invoiced $64,000. Towards the end of the year, as it was clear that we weren't able to come into an agreement, we did have to, for liquidity purposes, furlough your drivers. And so if we do come to an agreement, we would be happy to issue an additional credit for that labor, which would be another $8,000. And so what we're asking for is $55,000. And I laid that out, Heather, in that email that I sent over to you. In terms of some of the other questions that you had, the specific numbers are, we have negotiated with 101 of our districts, which represents 94% of our billings. The majority, Lunenburg was pretty much the only contracted piece of work that we didn't get an agreement on. The rest of it, we service some one-off McKinney-Vento and so forth in some of the smaller areas. And that's really where we weren't able to get the rest of the agreement. So that was about 6% of our revenue. I saw the question about what assurances that we could give the town. I mean, we are serving our customers. I believe we did some summer transportation for you already. Our contract that we have with you goes through June 30 of 2021. We stand ready to provide services. Excuse me. The last question about the impact of not paying. I mean, if our customers didn't support us, and many of them did, we would not have been able to pay our expenses. And so the short answer to that is absolutely critical to maintain our readiness to serve. We have a wonderful staff of drivers, a wonderful fleet, and today, thanks to the support of the districts, it's standing ready to go back to school whenever school goes back. Thank you.
Anybody else from Vanpool?
Lisa, you want to speak?
Hold on, let me unmute.
Sorry, I have my dog barking in the back, so I had to mute myself. He's not pleased.
Thank you.
We've had a great relationship with Lunenburg. I've appreciated it. I've been working with Lunenburg since Atlantic Express went out of business, and which was, I think, 8 years ago, something like that.
Lisa, can you bring that up though? I mean, why we ended up in Lunenburg? I think this is important. You had a company that went out of business within 3 days. We were able to pick up that and service the town, which would have been trouble.
Yeah. So we were able to. We were doing the out of district, but the in district, there was no transportation, so they came to us, and we worked over Christmas vacation. Hired them and got it ready to go.
So her dog's barking in the background.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Her dog's barking in the background. It's the story that I wanted her to tell. So when Atlantic School Bus went out of business, I know Dee was there, and I know Vanpool was there. Atlantic School Bus, you guys didn't have a bond at the time. They went out of business. It happened in Hudson too. NRT took over a good portion of NRT took over a good portion of the business at the time. And on the Vanpool side, you needed your special needs children picked up. And in 3 days' notice, we were there to pick up those kids, and they didn't miss. They didn't miss a day of school. They that wasn't interrupted. We hired the drivers that were with Atlantic Express and able to put those folks on. So it was a pretty smooth transition. And I apologize the difference between Cor's 94% and my 99%. We do two different types of transportation. We do yellow bus and then we do special needs. So on the 99%, the yellow bus, we collected 99% of our yellow bus contracts. We are in the middle of collecting with our last town, and that's why I said 99%. And what Cor was referencing, he was referencing 94% of the special needs, which 4 of the communities we are still negotiating with.
Correct.
Thank you. I will ask Sandra from D-Bus.
Yes. Thank you, John. Many of the things that they touched on, D-Bus service, same exact answers. We've been in transportation for 50 years we've been doing transportation. And when we get to the contractual portion of it, you know, D-Bus and all the transportation companies are contracted for 180 days, but that doesn't mean for 365 days, exactly like John was saying, we are working, our dispatchers, the mechanics, everything is still running. So I know that we're only contracted and paid for 180, but when we do those bids and price the bids accordingly, we're bidding it over 365 so that it's just so much work. I mean, we're working day and night right now trying to make sure that the going back to school is going to be seamless. And again, we were part of that 2014 debacle with Atlantic Express over Christmas vacation. I know that Vanpool, NRT, they were running to the registry with us. It was over Christmas break. It was flawless. We had a great rapport. We had a great dispatcher. And I know that NRT can say the same thing. We didn't miss a beat. And I think there has to be something said for that. And we will be here in the fall ready for these kids to go back. But, you know, it's not just 180 days. And so when we sign a contract, there's so many factors that go into that. And when I sent over my numbers, I just put the Lunenburg portion because that's all that was asked for. We did get the PPP. I know that, you know, the other companies might be different. So we didn't get the tax credit. We got the PPP. We kept our drivers on payroll. We kept our mechanics on payroll until that money ran out. Our drivers are eligible for unemployment when there's a company shutdown, which means during vacation breaks or when there's not enough work. When that money ran out from the PPP, we placed them on unemployment and they will stay on unemployment until we recall them back for the fall. Again, we did the same exact things. All our drivers kept a date with their license, all the hours that they have to do. They have to all do 8 hours of in-service training to keep their certificate up to date. The buses were maintained. So we were ready, willing, and able to go whenever Lunenburg said jump. We were going to say, okay, how high? When are we going back to school? So we worked with all the other districts, and I know that Lunenburg pulled out of that that group. It was a struggle. It was a lot of meeting. I felt like it was Groundhog Day. Every day we talked about the same thing. John and Cor can confirm that. But I'm hoping that we can come to some sort of agreement so we can put this behind us and move on to this year, which hopefully won't be as stressful. But again, we're looking to figure this out and come to an agreement.
Okay, Mr. Jeffries, you have a question.
I do. I have a couple of questions. So first, I think that there's no question that, you know, from what the school's superintendent, Dr. Burnham, mentioned last time, as well as Mr. Cassidy, I think there's no question that the school's perspective is that both companies have been an excellent partner to work with for the children. So my questions today are really not about that aspect of it as much as it's just about money. And, you know, businesses have profit to allow businesses to be flexible, to allow businesses to be resilient. Governments, we have small rainy day funds and we have cuts. So when we don't get our income, that's what we have to do, is cut. So what my first concern in this conversation is that next year, all indications are that we're not going to receive, the state's not generating as much money as it used to make. And unless something really dramatic happens, I think it's fair to assume that we're not going to receive as much money next year in state aid as we received this year. Now, schools are a significant portion of our budget. And so any impact to our budget is going to have a larger impact to the schools. So if we were, this year we received $9 million. So if we were to have $1 million cut, schools would then see, if it was proportionate, a 60-something% cut, roughly, 60% roughly. And 60% cut in the school budget means that teachers are going to lose their jobs. It means that their families are going to be impacted by that. It means that the quality of education from children is going to decrease. So that's how we respond to changes in the marketplace. And, the assumption then is that businesses over time, that you use some of that profit to prepare for earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, unforeseen events, as well as your expansion ability. My question then is along those lines, which is, what happens on October the 15th if today we agree to pay this money? What happens on October the 15th if schools need to close again? And this question goes to both Sandra and Mr. McCarthy. I have to assume that your business plan is not that communities will pay you regardless of whether or not you have services. I have to assume that in the last 4 months you've considered that this could happen again. So I'm wondering what your plan is if it does.
So, Mr. Jeffries, I'll answer that question. And I've been on the phone most of the last 2 weeks, along with Mr. Van Dyk, and working out that very scenario that, we've worked with districts. We're not talking about next year's budget. We are talking about last year's budget, which last year's budget, we were working off of last year's budget with those times. Now, if October 15th came and said that there's going to be no school, we would do the same thing. We would sit and wait, just like the teachers, just like the janitors, just like the cafeteria workers. See, our system is built this way right now. We've built an educational system where kids go to a building to learn, and we've provided transportation for those folks. Again, I've been doing this for 31 years, and something you just said that really rung true. We're a company of profit. And again, that's why I said I'll be more than happy to have you or anybody else contact Peter McNulty. We operated on, ready? 3%. 3% profit. There isn't a big margin in school busing, just so you know. And that was the number I told Mr. McNulty on the 20th of March, who didn't believe me until he came in and looked at our financials. And I was able to show him exactly where we operated from. Listen, we lost the athletics. We lost the field trips. It doesn't take long when you lose $5 million worth of transportation to eat up your profits when you're at 3%. So again, if October 15th comes and they ask for no school, I've already talked to 10 of my communities, and we've worked out an agreement that they will pay for readiness of services. The service we keep hanging our hat on is picking up and dropping off the child. That isn't the service is much broader than that. And I hope that you heard Mr. Van Dyk about, and Sandra Martin, what supports that service. The driver is just one portion of the service. And when we went to the state to remove, during COVID-19, 4156, legislative people in state government felt that this was important, along with Commissioner Riley and the governor, to say that communities should negotiate this for readiness of services for the children. Because, and again, you'll read about it in the papers very shortly, but the town of Wayland did not come to an agreement with their provider. They had to put their contract out to bid because it was based on 180 days. And I'm not saying this because I want anybody to get nervous, but it's an example, and it's true, and it's going to be printed very shortly. Town of Wayland was paying $365 a day for a school bus. Their new price now is $800 because First Student gouged. They took advantage of a situation and taken advantage of that small community. And they're faced with a true crisis now on next year's budget. We're trying to work out to stay here, ready, able, and willing to take your kids. Regular ed's is a privilege, but special needs is a right. They have the right to be transported, along with your McKinney-Vento, who have the right to be transported. And there's companies like us that will provide that service. But we project our cost over the school year. This has never happened before. We could not foresee what this. We've had snow days. We've had long-term snow. A couple of years ago, we had 10 days, and the state forgave 2 of those days. We've never had anything like this. And again, if it wasn't for the cities and towns that supported us, we may not have been here, and you might just very well not have had us on the meeting tonight, that you might have been dealing with trying to find another company to try to do that if they survived. Again, Atlantic Express went out of business. They went out of business. They didn't tell you they were going out of business. They went out of business. You guys didn't have a bond. You made some phone calls, and a couple of companies stood up and came to the plate and provided the service that the town needed and got those kids to school. We didn't ask, we just did. And by the way, we provided those services at the rate that you were being charged at the time that business went out. We didn't gouge. We didn't take advantage. Hang on for 1 second. We didn't take advantage of that situation.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. McCarthy. I don't know if you've answered the question. And I certainly think you've made a really effective case for why this is necessary, but that's not what I asked. What I'm asking is just what the plan is come October the 15th if we find ourselves in this situation again.
I thought I did. I thought I would said on October 15th, like I've already done with some other communities, and I thought I said that in the beginning, that we've already worked with those cities and towns that we would stand ready to provide services when we return back to school. And yes, we have cities and towns that have already agreed to pay a percentage to us to provide readiness of service. They understand.
Is that also your expectation in Lunenburg then, that come October the 15th, what is your expectation in terms of pay? If schools aren't going, if kids aren't going to school anymore, what pay do you expect?
Well,
from October 15th till a question mark period of time.
My expectation, I don't have an expectation, right? What I would hope is that the Lunenburg Selectmen would do what they needed to do for the children and their constituents. And when it's time to go back to school, that they have a school bus provider willing and able to go back and provide those services. And until we figure out another way, of educating these kids, and we have proven that virtual learning has not worked at this point, right? Until we can figure that out, I think this is going to be a reality. I do believe we're going to get back to normal. This is going to end, and we're going to need transportation. And I hope we're the companies that are going to provide that service that we've done in the past, and I think we've successfully done.
Thank you. Ms. Martin, if you wouldn't mind answering the question.
Yeah, can I also add that, does our contract not, we're under contract with you, and when we bid a contract, it's for a period of time, whether it's 3 years with a 2-year extension. We may take a hit some year if there's not a fuel clause in the contract. We may lose because of a fuel that year if there was a spike in the fuel. That's a chance we take, but doesn't the contract, isn't that worth something? We're under contract with you. So why I feel like that it's just being pushed aside and saying, okay, even though we have a contract, it means nothing.
Well, I'm only one member. The other 4 members haven't spoken. They haven't asked any questions. So my question really is just getting this conversation started and trying to understand what, and in this time, I have to imagine that this has been a pressing problem for you. So I'm wondering if we're going to be looking at December the 15th, having the same discussion if schools close again. That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah,
So-
and I can't promise that we won't have this conversation again.
I
Thank
think we're going to be right back where we are right now.
Are you also operating, Ms. Martin, on a 3% margin of profit?
I don't know what the percentage is. I put numbers in there, but it's low. I mean, listen, we lost so much money this year with the extracurricular and the sporting events, and that's not coming back anytime this year. So 3 or 4%, that's about where we are at this point in time. It's not a huge margin.
It's not.
Mr. Van Dyke, you
Thank
wanted
you.
to say something.
Yeah, and actually to answer the question as well, when we were calculating the discounts, the roughly 3% profit that we do have, that was the first thing that we took off the bill. And so that was passed right along. And if we will lose money this year for sure. And also, we've been under pressure as well the last few years, and with the minimum wage increases, the increases are impacting our drivers and monitors, as well as the paid FMLA in Massachusetts and the paid sick time. So we've been absorbing those costs, which keep our profits very thin. And again, one of the first things we did was pass along our profit in the discount.
Thank you.
Mr. Marino.
I was the one who actually asked that we delay this vote so that I could gather more information. I've tried to garner as much of that as possible. I've spoken to Sandra and Bo. Spoken to the superintendent on more than one occasion. They've provided me with a lot of information. I looked at section 12 and 13 of the Chapter 92 of the Acts of 2020. And as I've done with laws all my entire career, is try to understand the intent of it. And the intent of that law is abundantly clear. The intent of that law is to to maintain the continuation of bus services, as well as to continue to try to stabilize the economy. The federal government, the state has done that with unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance is a key economic stabilizer. They've given everybody approximately $600 each week in their check extra to try to help workers make ends meet and support any efforts for a job search or keep people connected to work and uphold living standards and preserve economic stability. It was clear what the intent of that law was. I've looked at the contract between D-Bus, and I'm sorry, John, I don't have your contract, but it's not necessary. I looked at the contract between the school and D-Bus, and it's clear that the school has created a partnership between these bus companies. Very clear. I've looked at all of the concerns of all the other 12 communities, which in essence are all basically the same and boil down to losing transportation, continuation of bus services. Some of the concerns with the policies regarding how they're going to pay in the future. Now, presently they pay over, I believe it was a 7-month period. They're concerned that they're going to have to pay up front. And at any rate, the contract and the invitation to bid for these contracts speaks loud to me. School buses really only have one purpose: to transport students. They're purchased, typically leased, or they're borrowed. One of the concerns is that where bus companies have to obtain contracts and then go to the banks or the leasing companies and provide them with the contracts before they're going to get the money to buy buses. And what's going to happen in the future? Are the banks going to be willing to lend money to bus companies if contracts aren't going to be paid? I highly doubt that. In the contract, school buses are used solely for the transportation of students. of the Lunenburg school system. Buses that will be marked in the same manner, such as designated Lunenburg Public Schools on the side. That's in the contract. They have to do that. That's got to be approved by the superintendent. Just the style of the lettering on the buses. They're utilized under contract for daily transportation of students. Must be registered in the town of Lunenburg. The bus company bears the expense of housing the buses in Lunenburg, and from what I understand, the bus company bought a building here in Lunenburg, or at least leases, and I'm not sure, but they can answer that question. So that had to be expensive. That was just so they could provide bus transportation to the town of Lunenburg. In declared emergencies, buses are required to be left on school property at the discretion of the school department so that evacuation can start with the least possible delay. I don't know if anybody knew that. In the event of a declared emergency, the buses are required to be left on town property and shall be available to be used for the evacuation of residents if it's deemed necessary. The bus company bears all expenses and provides at no cost, equipment, personnel for the purposes of conducting evacuation drills at least twice a year. Do it for free. Bus drivers may be trained to administer epinephrine. Didn't know if you knew that. Whenever a school nurse is unavailable. Buses can't be older than 5 years old. So they have to buy or lease new buses every 5 years. They got to be equipped with video surveillance equipment. And the school has autonomy over all of that. They don't get to look at any of the video, that's normal. I mean, that's proper. But they have to provide the equipment. The school has the ability or they're the sole property owner of that, all of that data, the video and the audio. So in addition to that, in the contract, a school bus company has to state the following is true. There has not been a multi-year trend in operating loss. There are no substantial tax liabilities. There has not been an excessive accumulation of accounts receivable or bad debts, and there are no significant contingent liabilities such as pending litigation or property liens. That's going to be pretty difficult in the future if these contracts aren't paid to make those statements true. So last time we met on this, I was stuck between Cilia and Charybdis on this issue. I look at it as what's known in French as a force majeure, an event or effect that cannot be reasonably anticipated or controlled. They had, I've heard that, well, they should understand their business model and they should understand that they have to take a loss and so on and so forth, but I don't find that to be true. Nobody anticipated a pandemic, nor would anybody. And there's nothing in the contract that has anything close to any language about any kind of disruption in the contract caused by a pandemic. The closest thing to a greater force or a force majeure in the contract is the athletic department maybe canceling an event within 30 minutes because maybe there's rain or somebody got sick, and that's about it. So those greater force events are common clauses in contracts that essentially free both parties. So in other words, it can work both ways. And I look at it that way. They did not anticipate this happening. They couldn't have possibly anticipated this happening. This is a situation where it's an extraordinary event, extraordinary. And in extraordinary events, sometimes you have to take extraordinary measures, and this is one of them. I think the school who created a team, and they spoke, all 13 of them got together and decided what the best course of action, what's the least offensive course of action. And I think they were right. And I agree with them wholeheartedly. I think that's what they should have did. That's what the government did to try to keep the economy stabilized. They gave money to everybody that was unemployed to stabilize the economy. They essentially were doing the same thing. And another thing is, yeah, we might have to spend a little more money in this contract to make them, to keep them solvent so that they can continue to transport students. And by the way, there's a thing called access and equity, something that the school department is required to provide access to education on an equal basis. There are kids out there that do not have any other way to get to school and they need to be bused. So I agree with them wholeheartedly. And I believe they're doing the right thing. And what I was gonna say is, yes, we're gonna understand, we gotta understand that we gotta spend money in certain areas because of this pandemic. But my experience this year as a police chief, I was able to save thousands of dollars because of the pandemic. Why? Well, because there was no court. It was all done on video, so I didn't have to pay overtime to send people to court. There was arraignments by video, so there was no court. There was no lockup fees. There was no court fees associated with that or overtime fees. The academies were closed, so the people we had slated going for the academies didn't go to the academy, so I didn't have to pay those training funds. There was no other training that I had to pay overtime for, professional development training. A lot of that was done on video. I didn't have to pay overtime to send somebody to a classroom. So I saved thousands and thousands of dollars in my budget. So yeah, the pandemic might cost the school a little more money in their busing contract, but I know there was money saved up for other reasons. And if you talk to the public, some of them will tell you that they're out, oddly enough, they save money in other areas because of the pandemic. They saved money in gasoline, for instance, which we did. We saved money in cruiser maintenance because we didn't spend as much on gas, and the gas prices went down. So there is money to cover expenses that we didn't anticipate, but there's also savings we didn't anticipate. So at any rate, I fully agree with the school, and I think they did the right thing, and I think they did the right thing with whatever they had left over in that account. And I support them on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're muted, Tom.
Ms. Adams.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And first I want to say thank you to both bus companies for all they have done and will be doing with everything that's going ahead. And I feel sorry for any business owners, small business owners. I think all of these rules and mandates and all the unpredictability has been damaging and devastating to so many businesses. I stated my thoughts at a previous meeting, and of course, there's been a lot of good new input to reflect upon tonight from Selectman Marino and hearing from the bus companies, but I am going to repeat and sort of go through some of my thoughts in terms of seeing my role here, thinking about tax money and taxpayers in general and how people may be concerned about the opposing side of making payment for services not rendered. I'll begin by the important point that the rules or the laws as they stood before this conversation started back in June was that we typically don't pay for services not rendered. In order to make the payment that we discussed tonight for anyone listening or on the meeting, in order to actually make this payment that's being requested, the laws had to be changed. Legislation was changed, and we've had so much changing legislation, who can even keep track of it? But the rules had to be changed to authorize this payment to make it legal, because prior to that, it wouldn't be ethical or legal to pay for services not rendered. Of course, now we are all given this change of circumstances that make us look at everything differently. I feel that making this payment is a little bit inequitable in the sense that my mind floods with all different people who are harmed. What companies provided the clay and art supplies for the art room that weren't used? What companies supplied the milk for the cafeteria that wasn't opened? And the cafeteria did run, so some of my examples could be picked apart. But in general, a lot of supplies and things were slated to go to the school, became essentially services or products, you know, unused, and therefore the trickling effects of damaging people is in so many directions that I can't justify why we would support one small business in a way that we're not going to be able to support others. Another comment that came up in the last time we discussed this and tonight was that the buses were on standby. If the bus company had other opportunities that we prevented them from having, so while they were on standby for us to figure out what the governor was going to do with all of us, and they missed an opportunity, I would feel that we, you know, would more likely owe the money for the services not rendered. But while they were on standby, we all were. Everybody was missing some type of work or opportunity. And so there wasn't a missed opportunity. We all missed all of our opportunities during that period. I also feel this question came up from Selectman Jeffries. I always worry about setting precedent. So if we make this payment for services not rendered, how do we deny the payment in the future for services not rendered? So if we have a contract and school goes full remote sometime in the fall, and I hope not, but that's certainly a possibility. When this money's asked for in the future for services not rendered, do we constantly owe it? And do we open up the opportunity for other companies to come ask for their services not rendered? So I worry about setting a precedent that we can't meet as a municipality. Like I had said, there was widespread suffering. I don't know how to justify helping one group. And I said this last time we talked about it, we're a municipal government, not a charity. Any money we allocate to one thing is a loss to another. And even if it's true that some money may have technically been saved by some departments, I'm more thinking about the future, and we gain our money through taxes. And if there's not some type of, you know, massive economic downturn ahead, I would be surprised. And so having the money, which I think is about $135,000 added together, that could be the salary of a police officer in a future fiscal year, not really what we've saved in the past, but all of the stress that lies ahead with everything that's happened. And I just have a few other notes here. Ultimately, the bus companies, although they have a unique partnership with the school, it is a private for-profit enterprise. There was the unemployment and the small business assistance, and hopefully everybody who needed those was able to tap into those, not just the bus company, but anyone. I don't think as a small local government, we can stabilize other small businesses when we may not be able to stabilize ourselves moving forward. Will we be looking at teacher layoffs? Will we not be able to afford to, you know, keep library open certain days? We don't know what type of incoming tax revenue will be down in the future. And so I just feel like it's prudent to save money when necessary. And I cycle back to my original thought that the laws originally supported us keeping this tax money, and the law actually had to be changed for us to even have this conversation. That's all I have for now.
Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep this brief. We're in a pandemic. Hasn't happened in over 100 years. And it's kind of thrown the entire country, not just, you know, our little town, in a loop. I think the request is perfectly reasonable and I support it.
That was short. So I'll weigh in for my sake. So I think there's a lot. I mean, again, I'll do as Mr. Dwyer does. I'll try to be short, but I do offer some explanation, at least for my vote. And that obviously this is, nobody could expect what happened. And there are risks in business. There are risks everywhere. And nobody obviously could put in their game plan. Hey, do we have a contingent for a pandemic 2 years ago? No one would have thought about that. So I understand that. The state, the town is in a kind of a unique situation, or any municipality is in a unique situation, is that we gain our money from taxpayers and than taxpayers. So we get it from the state from taxpayers, and we get it from our town from taxpayers. And with unemployment in Massachusetts being among the highest, if not the highest in the country right now, with every indication that tax revenue from the state level is going to be severely diminished, and we may be looking at big cuts next year, and the fact that we can't run in a deficit spending, neither can the state, we're obviously up against a rock and a hard place. I understand the position that the bus companies have portrayed here, and I, as a prior small business owner and somebody who works for a small company, although not as an owner now, I totally understand that. But I also think some allowances should be made. So I think that the idea that Ms. Adams says about setting a precedent is also important, and it ties into Mr. Jeffrey's initial question about what's going to happen going forward if in a very likely, I don't know statistically how likely, but it's not unforeseeable that we may have a shutdown again from the state level. So to come to balance with that, I think that since the majority of the contract was paid for and you did stay on standby, I think that the proposal before us is reasonable for the last part of this year, of this past year. But I will say, and I will say very frankly and very strongly, I will not be in support of anything going forward of the same thing. So if this would happen in October or just November, again, I would be less likely to be in support of it, because I think, again, everybody's planning on a very sandy, shaky foundation, and that's where we all are. And I think everybody has got to participate in that game and has to have a stake in that. That's just the way it is for me. So I would be supporting this proposal for the FY20 budget, but I will not be supporting anything that would go forward that would even remotely mimic this in the current school year. Mr. Jeffries.
Thank you for the additional information. I also want to thank Selectman Marino for his input, and I certainly trust his insight, his research here, and his perspective, as well as the perspective of my fellow members on this board. I'm not going to be able to support this request today that's being made. I support it in part for Mr. McCarthy's company. I support partial payment here, about 25% of what's being requested, and I don't support any part of what D-Bus Services is requesting. And just to explain, from my perspective, I understand that you guys are, I mean, I know we've said small businesses, but I would imagine that given the amount of employees that you have, that you probably don't qualify anymore as a small business, or at least you're a large small business. But I think that there's always risk involved in business. I know that you probably did not foresee that this was going to happen. But what I foresee is that we're going to be laying off teachers in a year from now. And that some teacher's going to come and say, but you gave the bus company $134,000. You know, that has a real impact on people's lives. The taxpayers of our town, certainly I think as this board, are split on their own thoughts, I would imagine. It's a tough call, but I agree with Selectman Adams that when the contract was entered into, when the contract was negotiated, that it was understood that if services weren't actually rendered, that you would not receive pay. But I think you hedged your bets that likelihood was really small. And unfortunately, we got that off chance and it happened. I'm curious as to whether or not any of your payments owed to banks have been put in forbearance. So that way you're only having to pay interest, or if you've asked.
No.
So have you asked?
We have not asked. We've been very good at what we're doing here. We've asked for support, and we've made sure that at this point we have made good, along with our bonds.
Okay. And Ms. Martin, have you asked to have your loans put in forbearance to make interest-only payments during this time?
You're on.
Hold on, Sandra, you muted yourself here. Go ahead.
We have continued to pay our bus payments because our feeling was it's just going to extend the inevitable. We're going to have to owe those payments at some time. So we want to continue paying what we can while we can. Because
Okay.
again, we still need the funding. If we're going to bid another contract next year, we're going to have to fill out some more loan documents, and if we're not paying our current loans and only the interest, that's not going to look well.
So with all the options on the table, I think that from my perspective, as a fellow business owner, from my perspective, I think that facing dire circumstances, you go through all results possible. One of those being, hey, let me go back to these loans I have. Let me see what conditions I can work out before I need to ask taxpayers to pay for services they're not receiving. I think that had the discussion tonight been more focused on all the efforts you've gone through to try to recover some of this money, and you just are short by so much, I think I would certainly be in favor of it. But from my perspective, I think there was a really long response from our last meeting till, we got a letter today from D-Bus Company. We got an email on the 28th of August from Mr. McCarthy's company, Vanpool. And it just, from my own perspective, I think that I would have preferred to have seen today a more robust explanation for why you cannot why you can't make your bills if we don't do this. Because as Ms. Selectman Adams mentioned, it is uncommon for local governments to be charities. And that's what and in many ways, that's what's being asked, is for us to make a contribution to a private enterprise that is certainly a vital partner, as many other companies are as well, but to make a payment to a private company to sustain you without, to me, the proof that is actually necessary. So with that, I am going to be a no today. But I do appreciate the efforts, and certainly I second Mr. Alonzo's statement that I am not in favor of this today, and I do not anticipate that I will be in favor of this in the future. I strongly encourage both companies to come up with a contingency plan for if this happens again in the future, how you're going to reduce your expenses, so that way your business model does not rely on the taxpayers providing payment for services not rendered.
Mr. Jeffries, I appreciate your business advice, and I'll heed that. But I'm gonna quickly say this one more time before you guys vote. What happened in Wayland is not a mistake. What happened in Wayland is they chose not to pay a fee, and it was at bid time. So that company is trying to make up what they lost, which ultimately is falling on the taxpayers. What we've done here is ask for a portion of that payment, not just to stay solvent, but to keep readiness of services. It's not whether or not we were going out of business. It's what we did in good faith with what was in that contract, based on what we read in that contract, which that contract, there is one other city that there's been a lawsuit filed with right now because they've decided not to pay, and the Suffolk District Court has accepted that lawsuit to go forward. And again, that's not what we're trying to do. What we've done is, in good faith, ask for what we believe we are entitled to based on the services that we did render. You are saying that we didn't render picking up and delivering the children to school, but there are other services that Mr. Marino has in that contract that we did provide during this time. It is clearly stated in that contract what services need to be provided above and beyond picking up and dropping off the children, and those services were rendered. So I hope, as you think about the decision about making, again, we have been a good partner. We have paid our taxes. We're not asking for charity. We're asking for payment due on services that were rendered. And we hope that this board can make a good decision.
Madam Town Manager.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. I just had a few clarifying questions for Ms. Martin for D-Bus. The request that you're asking for based on what you sent today for the breakdown was the total amount for the 3 months was $205,413. But subtracting, I'm assuming subtracting out the salary and rent that was covered under PPP. Okay, so that's $137,413. Okay, but the school committee and Mr. Cassidy or Dr. Burnham, the school committee voted no more than 94,000. Is that correct?
Well,
Okay.
you had asked for what our costs were for those 3 months for just specifically Lunenburg.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what the total request before the Board of Selectmen tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you, Madam Town Manager, because before we take a vote, I'm going to ask you to review what we're being asked to approve for both of the companies. So we're not at that point just yet.
And either Mr. McCarthy or Mr. Van Dyk, the van pool's requesting $55,664.
That is correct.
And the school committee voted for 41,000. Okay, all right, thank you.
And where can anybody, Madam Town Manager or Dr. Burnham or Mr. Cassidy, can you explain how the school committee got to the amounts that they got to? What were they excluding in this? Just so the board, we didn't get their written decision. So can you provide what how they calculated the request versus what they approved?
I think that Mr. Cassidy can confirm that this was based on 50% of the remaining contract.
Mr. Cassidy, is that accurate?
Okay, yeah, I was having trouble unmuting. I want to confirm that the 41,000 for Vanpool was the projected, half of the projected amount of the transportation costs for our special needs students. And there was, for D-Bus, it was half of the remaining contract and an adjustment on a slight overpayment because we pay our D-Bus at the beginning of the month for services, so that they had originally gotten paid for March. So that was the adjustment down to 94,000.
Okay, and Madam Town Manager, what were the two requests? So for Vanpool, the school committee approved 41K, and for D, 94. Can you tell us what the both requests are? What was the request from Vanpool?
Vanpool was $55,664.
55,000 would be fine. Okay.
And D-Bus was $137,413.
Okay. All right. So just so we know. All right. Ms. Adams.
Sure. Just was going to summarize my thoughts. In terms of discussing the legislation changing and the services not rendered, I may be incorrect, but when we were talking, Mr. Cassidy had given an example. We were trying to build understanding of the school can have something like an elevator contract was the example. And you have that contract and you have, your terms. But if the elevator isn't repaired when it's broken, then the service wasn't rendered. And very much that's what happened here. Unfortunately, not that we wanted it, not that anybody wanted it, but the service is to be available for the children. And some of those other items mentioned, like being available when there's an emergency and different types of things, simply the school was shut down. And the services weren't rendered, not because you didn't want to, not because we didn't want to receive them, but that's just the reality. And because of the former rules, it would not have been allowed for us to make these payments. Legislation was changed to even allow these type of payments to be made because of all these changing circumstances. So in this situation, and I had this mindset at the previous meeting, And all the extra information just makes everything feel worse. Everybody has suffered so much. I had concerns, at the previous meeting about small business. It feels even worse now to put a face and a story behind it. But at the end of it, I feel that I sit here in the mindset of municipal money, municipal government, and there's a lot of taxpayers out there who are putting their money into the municipal pool, into Lunenburg. And what does that mean to them? Well, just as everything from the perspective of the bus companies is suffering, so are the parents, so are the students and teachers. I mean, if they're lucky, kids that are choosing hybrid will be in school 2 days a week. Parents will put their kids on a bus 2 days a week. And I know that the dynamic is that we're social distancing and the buses will work just as hard. But from the perspective of a parent, and I've always driven, so I don't, I'm not using myself as an example, but if my children took the bus, I'd be putting them on there 2 days a week. I'm changing my life in all these ways to have extra help and support for, my job as a parent and things like that. And, when taxpayers start asking, well, what type of relief is the government going to give me? All these things are changing in my life. I just don't see that we can take tax money and use it in a charitable way when most people are suffering in some way, financially or socially or emotionally or mentally. And so I just think this is not something that's easy to understand, but typically if the rule of thumb is that we don't pay for services not rendered, then as a protector of tax money, I think that we don't set the precedent. If other selectmen don't think they would want to make this decision in the future, I would encourage them to not make it now, because setting precedent changes a lot of things, and it can change the way things are legislated too, or looked at legally. If anybody feels that this isn't something we want to be doing in the future, I think that we all realize that most people lost something in the spring, and this is just another one of those losses.
So just some passing notes, and then I'm going to get the town manager just to review, just for the sake of this. So two things. First of all, as we go, I heard all the arguments and all the discussion points and everything, and I certainly understand that. I'll tell you the one that was used a lot that I find the least compelling, and that is the fact that I'm being told how many other towns did this, and clearly wants to put the town in the minority. And I would say that it matters not one bit to me what any other town has done regarding this. If they all didn't pay or they all did pay would not sway my vote. And I think using it as leverage, as some kind of municipal peer pressure, I think is kind of I mean, I don't think it was used intentionally to be distasteful. I would say that my reaction to it is certainly distasteful. But anyway, that aside.
Tom, the question was originally asked, though. We didn't bring it up. Tom,
Yeah,
that was asked.
Hold on a second. I saw Miss Altarizio raise her hand. Let me get her unmuted first. Okay. I'm assuming the dog has stopped barking at this point. There you go.
Stop barking. I just, I want to talk about the services not rendered real quick. I've been in the trenches. I've been in the office. I mean, I'm the daily grind. In the Fitchburg office, there was one person since this happened, and it was Teresa. And she called every single driver weekly, which in that office is over 200 people. She worked on getting the vehicles back to the office to make sure that they were safe, starting them up every day. So to say that the services weren't rendered, for me, we have worked so hard since the day that we closed to make sure that we are ready for you guys. I assure you, services were rendered. We are engaging our people. We are trying to keep them there. We installed brand new Synovia systems in all of our vehicles. So there are things that are happening that our services render. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there to say we can't say that services weren't rendered. So that's all.
Okay.
Tom, and I apologize. The only reason why we brought up the amount of towns that paid is because we were asked at the beginning of the meeting what the percentage was. So I answered the question. So I apologize if it sounded like I was, pushing that in a way so that you felt like you were a minority. I wouldn't have brought it up if it wasn't asked.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Yep.
So, Madam Town Manager, do you have a breakdown? Is there a list of what was asked and what the school committee approved so we can look at that if I made you host here? Do you
No,
have
that's why I asked those clarifying questions. We have a document that displays all what other districts paid as far as percentages and the amounts. And they range, so the districts, when they did their, and Mr. Cassidy can correct me, but when they pooled together their resources and came to an agreement, the 13 districts, the 50% was the benchmark. There were some communities that paid more than that.
Okay.
But do you want me to reiterate the totals?
Sure.
Okay. So DBUS is requesting 137,413. The school committee voted for it not to exceed 94,000. Vanpool is requesting 55,664, and the school committee voted it not to exceed 41,000.
Just as a point of information, the actual figure was $41,112.
Say that again, Dr. Bruno?
$41,112.
Okay. So out of approximately 192,000 total being asked for, the school committee approved 135,000 approximately, just to round it off. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes.
Okay. Which is, so of what was asked and what was paid, that's certainly a lot more than 55%, and that seemingly was the average on that chart that we were given.
Was it the intention, if I may ask, Mr. Chair, to either town manager or to Dr. Burnham, was it the intention of the school committee to pay 50%?
That was the intention.
Okay.
But, well, clearly aren't the numbers here. So 50% of what? Mr. Van Dyke?
I believe when I hear that number 41,000, that's 50% of what we would have originally invoiced. Okay. And so the way I understand the proposal is a 50% discount. Our request of 55 is net of all of the discounts that we already offered, and you're offering lower than that. So I think the 41 shouldn't be understood in terms of the 55, but should be understood in terms of the original 82. And the same would go on the DBUS side, I'm guessing.
Correct, thank you.
Is that the way from the school department and from town manager? Is that the way this is understood? The 50% the school committee voted on was from what was owed for the contract, not from what was requested from the companies. Okay, I see some nods. Mr. Marino.
I just want to remind everybody to address the concern of whether or not this might happen in the future. The intent of Chapter 92, it states right in it that the disruptions caused by the outbreak of COVID-19 and the effects of the governor's March 10, 2020 declaration state of emergency, that's what triggered this. So anybody who's concerned about this happening again, as I stated before, this is an extraordinary situation which is going to need extraordinary measures. I don't foresee, unless this outbreak is out of control this fall or the next winter or this following spring, that we should have to be concerned with dealing with the situation a second time. That's all I just wanted to clarify. Well, the other thing I would like to say in response to one of the comments was that teachers, if they're concerned about us spending this money to make these bus companies whole, to keep them solvent, I would think they're concerned about making sure that the students get to school so they have somebody to teach. That's, those two things are, this transportation issue is about the most essential thing I can, that I can see. Thank you.
Okay, understood. To your point of not expecting this, I mean, it's already happened in some parts of the country that they opened school and then closed them again. So, I mean, it already has happened. So, I mean, it's not, nobody's expecting it, but nobody's going to be surprised if it actually happens. I mean, it's a real likelihood. If we were here last year at this time saying that, you know what, in March we're going to close, people would have been absolutely disbelief. The chances would be in 0.0 something percentage. But at this point, it certainly is a very possible option. We certainly all hope that it doesn't happen. All right, I'm going to open it up. If anybody would make a motion, I mean, so what's on the table, as far as I'm concerned, I can support up to, and certainly no more than what the school committee has approved. That is the number, that is the top number that I would be considering. That $135,000 total between the two companies, individually 41 plus to Vanpool and 94 plus to D bus service. So I wouldn't entertain, personally, I wouldn't entertain anything and wouldn't vote for anything higher than that. But
Mr. Chairman?
yeah, I'm not sure. I have somebody from the poll. I'm not sure I want to enter. You know what? I am going to entertain because this is a pretty hot issue. There's somebody on the public. I don't know who it is. I'm going to allow them to weigh in as a citizen. So hold on. Okay, so who is on 4001128? I'm trying to unmute you. *6 to unmute yourself. Again, 978-400-1128. If you would like to speak, I see your hand is up, but I, again, cannot unmute you. And now there's another one. I don't know that I can unmute any of these phone people. If you have muted yourself.
You have a phone that just unmuted.
The phone numbers I see are all muted.
The one I'm looking at just unmuted.
Which number are you looking at?
Doesn't have a number on it, just says iPhone.
Oh, no, I'm talking about phone numbers. Yeah.
Yeah, but it just unmuted. But they're not speaking.
I'm gonna mute everybody again. I tried to unmute everybody, but okay. So this is not gonna work. I apologize to the people on the phone. I cannot get Zoom to unmute you. I've unmuted everybody. So,
if you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can call some of these numbers, the two numbers that are here, put on speakerphone.
Yeah, this is the joys of going through pandemic Zoom meetings. I don't know that we're going to try that. Try one, Michael. See, do the 400 number, 400-1128. We'll give it a shot. Was that ever on phone number 400-1?
Jeffrey's calling. Looks as though you are attempting to speak at the meeting tonight. Okay, I'm going to put you on speakerphone then here. If you give me one moment. All right, I have them on the line. If you
Please identify yourself first, and then you can make your comment.
My name is Lemieux. I live at 181 Reservoir Road. I just have a comment. I'm really disgusted in the state for changing the law. You know, they recently passed that, I think it was called the Student Equity Act, which is going to reduce the amount of money to Lunenburg. And instead of putting those funds on hold and doing something to help the bus companies that they force us to have, they chose to put the burden on us. And I'm also disgusted that I represent myself, my family, and 2 other families that don't even have children in the school district. So as a taxpayer, to see money going for something that wasn't even provided to the town is really disturbing. I feel it's a bailout, and we aren't the federal government. We can't create money out of thin air. It comes directly from all the people. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lizzie.
One more number, Michael. The 582-7248.
Let me try that. I recognize the number, so I know who this one is.
I do too.
Whoever is on 582-7248, Selectman Jeffries is trying to call you because I can't unmute you on this call.
Hi, this is Selectman Jeffries calling. I see that you're trying to get into make a comment tonight. Okay. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. Please speak. Okay. I have it on speakerphone. Mr. Rogers, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Dave Rogers, 82 Highland Street, and I will be brief. The first question I have, which piggybacks Mr. Jeffries' question, was I'd like to know what the dollar amount would be in savings, so-called, or differences, so-called, if the forbearance agreement had been set up by both companies for rolling stock and leased property and anything that could have taken advantage of the forbearance agreement. Having said that, I take exception, and I disagree, frankly, with Ms. Martin, that anyone in the banking industry would look down upon someone that asked for a forbearance agreement, because there's tons of them out there. Okay? The last comment I would like to make is this. What will happen if Unitil were to come in and say, you folks in the town didn't really use all the electricity that you usually do, and we had expenses and bond expenses and payroll expenses, and it amounts to X number of dollars, and we are looking for you to make up the difference so that we won't have to raise our rates. What would we do then. But that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Does anybody have any numbers on the forbearance? I'm assuming you don't, but I'll ask anyway. Mr. Van Dyk.
It'd be roughly about $18,000. But let me make a comment on the forbearance. I'm the chief financial officer here. I've been speaking with our lenders every other week. And also, as you may recall from Mr. Marino's comments, we do need to buy new buses every 5 years. And we're actually in the process of buying several new buses for some other districts. I forget the exact number, but it was over 30. If we would put our loans into forbearance, there isn't any way that we would have been able to procure the buses we needed to start this year. So that's really just not an option. I know it's a nice idea, and it sounds good in theory, and I do appreciate the comment, but it isn't practical for us to continue to run the business that way.
Thank you. Ms. Adams.
Sure. I guess based on one comment that came up earlier, I don't know if it's something to ask Mr. Cassidy or run by town council, but do they foresee any, because this is an option that was given to...
Hello?
Oh.
Hello?
Yes.
Don't answer it. Don't answer.
Oh.
That's Mr. Rogers, I think.
So they unmuted, so that's good. You know, this was given as an option for selectmen and school committees to vote up or down. There was some inference that there could be legal repercussions for not paying. And I'm just looking for the professional opinion of, like I said, either town council or Mr. Cassidy. Are we facing any, you know, where this is given to us as a choice that we were supposed to have the opportunity to vote on this? How can there be any implications that we would be legally responsible to pay if we did vote no?
Mr. Costa, do you have
There he is. I didn't know if it was just one of those screens and, you know.
If you mention his name, he appears. He's like that kind of person.
In case you didn't think I was listening.
I've been dying to get in there, but I was muted for a period of time. So, I mean, we have investigated whether, you know, there's legal consequences against either the school committee, Board of Selectmen, the town of Lunenburg. It's really unclear. It sounds like there are other litigation going on in other school districts that will make that determination. Once again, this was volunteer. The way we looked at it, you know, with special legislation, you know, I think it really provided some guidance to school committees and Board of Selectmen to kind of move forward this school year, or last school year, or last fiscal year. Obviously, the coming fiscal year and school year, there's a lot of uncertainty as far as another legislation being implemented. I can't say that, but I'll tell you that, you know, just my conversations with Desi, everyone should be prepared for this school year and potential closings. I guess no one really was prepared for what happened last March, April, May, and June. So hopefully I answered your question, which is
available. Please connect to the internet and try again.
Sorry about that.
So I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, I think our legal counsel says that we're not obligated, but
Costa, would you concur?
As you can see, that there's some movement going forth in other districts.
Mr. Costa.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, so I would concur that there's no obligation or legal liability, in my opinion. Certainly, I can't foresee what the future may hold. I wouldn't have guessed back in January or February that there was a pandemic on the horizon, and that all that occurred in the ensuing 4, 5, 6 months was going to occur, that we would have special legislation after special legislation addressing all aspects of the law and municipal governance. And yet that's exactly what we've had since early March. So I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what'll happen. Schools return to session. I don't know what'll happen with respect to the operations of school districts, of school transportation companies, or of any other aspect of our day-to-day business. With respect to this particular special legislation, the language is careful. It uses terms like may. It doesn't use terms like shall. And so it gives municipalities, as I think Selectwoman Adams had alluded to, I don't know, maybe an hour ago at this point, she commented on the fact that it makes it possible because otherwise it would be impossible. The general premise of municipal law is that municipalities, public entities can't pay for services not rendered. And so by virtue of adopting the special legislation, it has been made clear that that is now a possibility if municipalities choose to do so. And certainly there is some guidance, and it's nothing more than guidance, that is issued from the governor's office, suggesting that municipalities look at the big picture and consider the appropriateness of paying for these costs, paying these school transportation, bus transportation companies, all or some portion of what they would otherwise be due. But the legislation doesn't obligate them to do that. And the governor's office has no jurisdiction or authority to obligate you to do that. And so from a liability perspective, I'm not concerned. I know I've seen some correspondence drafted in a very persuasive manner on behalf of certain companies that operate in this arena, suggesting that there is such liability. I'm of the strong opinion that there is not. That's not meant to encourage or discourage you to take one vote or another. That's a policy decision. But from a liability perspective, speaking legally and nothing more than that, I'm of the opinion that there's no liability that could befall the town in the event that you choose not to make payment.
Okay, I think we have discussed this, well, long enough, unless somebody has something new. Does anybody have something new to say? Mr. Jeffries, are you going to say something new, or are you just going to?
I have a question.
Okay, question. Go ahead.
So this question's for Mr. Van Dyk and also for Ms. Martin, which is just understanding that this money was not paid. How have you paid these expenses so far?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, you say that we should plan, and so we don't operate our company with $0 in the bank account. So we were able to get through. Now, as an answer to the question, the vast majority of our customers did support us. Had they not done that, we would have absolutely been bankrupt months ago.
So at this point, the money, though, that the answer is the money that you are asking for us to reimburse you for is money that was paid from funds held in reserve. Is that fair to say?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And is that also fair to say for Ms. Martin?
Correct. We use the funds from the other districts to help pay for all the other costs.
At this point, are either of you, have either of you gotten, without the money that you're requesting for today, looking at all your expenses, are any of you at a point where you haven't at least broken even?
We will lose this year.
We'll lose the money.
We will absolutely lose.
We lost.
I guess I'm not saying year over year loss. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is
it's a real
overall that you're in the red now.
This was a big hit. Just understand our business as you know it, and as we've partnered with you, and all the time that we've partnered with you, this was a big hit.
I understand that, but I think respectfully, Mr. McCarthy, you've really done a great job tonight advocating for your perspective. And my question here is really short tonight. It's just trying to get a better understanding of the money that you're asking us to reimburse as to where it came from. And it sounds as if you have the money in reserve, and that you're asking for us to reimburse some of those reserve funds that you've had to expend.
We're not asking you to reimburse our reserve funds. We're asking for you to make a decision to pay for services that were rendered. We believe these services were rendered, and that's what we're asking you to do at this point.
Ms. Adams, do you have a question?
No, just one new thing to add, since we're doing new things. There's really what we're talking about here is a connection between the municipal world and private enterprise. And even if we relinquish this, you know, $135,000, which is a kind and charitable thing to do, and I wish we could do it to everyone who's suffering, even if we do it, we do not guarantee that a private business could go out of business tomorrow. So even after we hand over this money, it's not predicting the future. It doesn't guarantee us any long-term outcomes.
Well, Ms. Adams, that's why you asked for bonds.
No, I don't want.
But that's why you asked for a bond.
Typically, we can't interrupt each other when we're.
I'm sorry.
And so my final point in this is that even doing this, we don't guarantee positive outcomes for a company. And so it's not our responsibility to take taxpayer money to help a company when it provides no guarantees. The school needs extra busing. We are doing all this hybridization so that we can have less children on the bus. If we ask the bus companies, hey, we need a favor, can you throw us a couple extra buses this year? Because as a municipality, we're suffering. We don't have enough money to pay for this extra busing. Are we gonna get free buses as we make the connection between private enterprise and municipal government?
Is that a form of a question?
No, it's in the form of a comment that I don't want interrupted. And so I'm just seeing this connection.
I'm going to take it as the form of a question, and I can assure you.
Let her finish the comment, Mr. McCarthy, and I'll come back to you first. I promise.
I'm not looking for debate. I'm just wrapping up. Where I stand on this is that even if we make the payment, it does not guarantee us that a company doesn't go out of business, change hands, or alter the way it operates. And so I think the money needs to be preserved for the town, because that's the point of tax money.
Mr. McCarthy.
As I respect, I highly respect your position. There are two things that assure you for readiness of services. One is a bond, something that you didn't ask for in your previous company. So when they went out of business and we picked up that business, and again, not charged any extra cost to do that, you didn't have a bond. You still haven't asked for a bond, and I suggest that the town does, right? The town asked for a bond to make sure that the companies that you are securing payment with today will be there and ready to perform services tomorrow on year 2021. And the fact is, Ms. Adams, many communities have already asked us for more buses, and we have in fact worked out a situation that we did it on a per cost basis on those extra buses. So in case example, Cor, what's it cost us to run a bus an hour?
$55 an hour.
$55 an hour. So when some of these buses were added, Ms. Adams, in some of the other communities that we're already agreed to, we've agreed to work it at $55 an hour. So instead of $365 a day, we're doing the extra ones for $165 for those runs, which is at a much lower cost. We're working with our communities, hoping that our communities will work with us and partner to get us all, so we all get through this. We realize that this is going to be a budget cruncher in the future. And I think at this point, what we do tonight and how we make this decision tonight will definitely affect how transportation is going to be done in the future in the town of Lunenburg. And we want to be your partner. We want to make sure that you don't get gouged, be taken advantage of, which we were there. And I realize, Ms. Adams, you were not there at that time, but we were when the last bus company failed to perform in your district, and we did not. We stood ready and took those kids to school right after Christmas vacation without missing a beat. Thank you.
I think we're ready to go forward here.
If I may add one thing to that, Tom.
Sure.
It's Cor. The one thing also that would help guarantee that, Ms. Adams, is that we have a contract and it runs through June 30 of next year. We've never stopped performing services under that contract, and we will continue to do so until the end of it. And also anticipating the need for extra buses for social distancing, we've actually purchased some additional buses, some used ones, and we're trying to be ready for what we see as a need across the Commonwealth.
You've purchased buses in the last couple of months?
Yes, we did.
Yes, we've purchased some used buses, yes.
Yes, we did. Based on need of the community.
Do all of your contracts require the buses to be less than 5 years old?
The majority of them do. That we have one contract that has a 10-year-old, but most of the contracts that we have are 3 to 5 years old. There is no age requirement in the state of Massachusetts that's done through the districts. Like I said, we have one district that actually asked for a 10-year-old bus, but the majority are 3 to 5, which is usually the average contract, 3 to 5 years.
Ms. Adams, you have your hand up again.
Sure, there's no easy answer here, and I see both sides fit. And I will make a motion that we do not support this payment to the bus company and Vanpool. And that's with condolences. It's just seeing, well, I've already explained myself, but that's my motion to not support.
We have a second. This is to deny the money. Do we have a second? No second. It seemed like from people's comments, they would not have gotten, well, maybe would have gotten 1 second. So,
Mr. Chairman, seeing there wasn't a second, I'd like to make an alternate motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve payment of $94,000 to D-Bus Company and a payment of $41,112 to Vanpool. The amounts should be in line with what was approved by the school committee.
can we verify that before I said we have a second? Is that the number, those numbers, what was read?
Those are the two numbers at the school, Mr. Chairman. This is Mike Cassidy. Those are the two numbers that were approved by the school committee in June. Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that?
Second.
Any further discussion? I don't think so. I think we've talked this out. So roll call vote. Ms. Adams.
I'll go with no, thank you.
Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Marino.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
No.
And an aye for me. Okay, so that is done. Again, I would offer the caveat that, this is taken extreme measures in extreme circumstances, and I don't foresee this going forward, having us this same discussion. So let's hope for everybody's sake we don't have to have that. But in the interim, it has been approved.
From Vanpool and NRT, I just appreciate you taking the time this evening. I know this was difficult, and we really appreciate your support. So
thank you.
Yes, thank you as well.
Thanks to the people from D-Bus, from Vanpool, from the school department. Thank you all for your participation. It's obviously not a very easy thing to discuss, but thank you for all your time and input on this.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye. Okay. Karen Brochu has not resolved her technical issues, so we are pushing her till next week for her the quarterly financial report.
You see her here though, Tom? Is she not here? I see her name unmuted.
Yeah, but she still doesn't have audio, and she's texted the town manager that her computer, because she's still going through the upgrade, is not behaving. So instead of fighting the technology again, we'll just do this next week. So that brings us to old business. First of all, Jennifer Sanderson or Kevin Bosom, are you here at all? Somebody on an iPhone. Whoever is on an iPhone, can you, I'll lower your hand. If you can let me know when I unmute you why your hand is up. Yes. Hello, somebody on the iPhone?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Who is this?
Jennifer Sanderson.
Okay, Jennifer. All right, we're going to do a quick interview here.
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties. I've tried my
Going
laptop.
around, don't worry.
Okay.
Seems to be in line. So tell us about yourself and your desire to be reappointed to the Historical Commission.
Okay, well, I've been the curator for the Lunenburg Historical Society for 4 years now. I became involved with the Historical Commission a few years ago. I really enjoyed my appointment there. I feel that Becky Lantry, I'd like to thank her for her service. She put in a lot of years and a lot of work. But I think that maybe with some new members and some new blood, we can really accomplish some things. We've now got 2 members of the Historical Society working on the commission. Kevin, if he gets appointment, would be great young blood to have. I'm all about the history of this town. I'm descended from the original selectmen. My involvement with the Historical Society has just proven that I really have a passion for it. So I would like to continue my work with the commission.
That's excellent. I will ask the board if they have any questions for Ms. Sanderson. If not, I would entertain a motion.
Just say thank you. I think it was years ago now, but I went to a presentation you did at the library. I think about Edna Adams, is that correct?
Yes, I actually had one scheduled in April, but COVID canceled it. So.
Yeah, I loved that. And I think of her clippings once in a while. That was lovely. So,
well, part 2 will come eventually.
Wonderful. So I would make a motion that we appoint Jennifer Sanderson, 848 Northfield Road, to the Historical Commission, term to expire June 30th, 2023.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote. Ms. Adams.
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Marino.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
And an aye for me. Thank you, Ms. Sanderson, and good luck for your next term on the commission.
Thank you so much.
You have a good night.
You too.
Thank you. Madam Town Manager, please have Elaine contact Mr. Bosom, and we will reschedule him. Old business, discussion on town charter, which was recently just signed, and discussion on the Parks Commission composition change. So I'll turn it over to you, Madam Town Manager, to talk about the charter. Maybe some comments from Mr. Costa as well. I don't know in this.
Yes, so I'll, it's actually incorporated into my town manager report, so I'll just take that on this topic out. So I was contacted by the Associate Director of Legislative Affairs in the Office of the Governor on Friday, August 21st, to notify me that the bill, which is Senate Bill 2754, to revise the town charter, was received by the governor. Their office asked us to review the bill and to let them know if the town was all right with the language. After our review, I was told we had 3 options, and the governor could either sign it as it was drafted, as it was passed by the legislature. The governor could veto the bill, or it could be returned to the legislature with amendments, which would be highly unpredictable. It would only make sense if there were major issues with the language that was passed by the legislature. Since our town council had painstakingly went through the tedious task to draft the submission to the legislature in a format that would be acceptable, I forwarded to Attorney Costa the parchment, which was forwarded to me, to do a compare and contrast based on the version he had submitted. So on Monday, August 24th, Attorney Costa concluded his review and denoted a few inconsistencies from what he had submitted and the language the legislature had passed. Those inconsistencies were under Article 1, Section 6, where the town had voted to replace Commonwealth with Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that was not incorporated. Section 3-7, paragraph B, the town had voted in the second sentence, this is under the library, that the sentence begin with the library board of trustees, and it says just the library. And section 3-14, they had missed replacing board of selectmen with select board in that section, but this was done throughout the document elsewhere where it was done correctly. So Attorney Costa and I had a conference call with the governor's legal team on Wednesday, August 26th. And after reviewing our options and hearing that it would be highly unlikely that the governor would return to the legislature a draft that had any changes that were identified,
as they were not substantive in nature. If we wish to have him veto the bill, it would likely take another 6 months or longer to have an approved charter. So ultimately, we agreed to proceed with the governor signing the version that was before him so as not to cause significant delays in a bill where the identified inconsistencies would be manageable. And all this had to be taken place. We had to make this decision in the time frame because once the governor receives the version of the bill, he has, there's 10 days before action has to be taken. So on Friday, August 28th, the governor signed the bill into its final form. So one of the questions outside of that that has come up is the Parks Commission and the options.
If you would hold that for a second.
Okay.
I have a question. Have we determined, I mean, this was supposed to be a partnership with our legislative delegation. Have we found out who made the edits and why they weren't relayed to us before this was sent to the governor, so we had a chance to comment before then? Have we found that out from either Representative Sena or Senator Tran?
No, I plan to contact both offices to see if either office is aware that those changes were made. But we were not contacted throughout the process of any changes.
Yeah, I mean, it's real. I have to say, just editorializing, it's really unconscionable that we waited this long and our town council painstakingly put the bill together to submit to them what the townspeople wanted. We're just lucky that the 3 things that were changed are not, is of significant impact. But it looks silly for us to have one mention of Board of Selectmen still in there because they missed it. It looks silly for the Library Board of Trustees to be removed. So now it says the library in that section. And the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is not in there. It's still the Commonwealth. It doesn't, I mean, these are ridiculous changes that we could have talked about if anybody had reached out to us throughout this process. All right, sorry. I just had to get that out. So yes, Parks Commission.
Parks Commission. So the revised charter now constitutes a 5-member Parks Commission. So the question is options to be taken is whether a special election or wait until the next annual election, or to consider it under a section of our charter which talks about notice of vacancies and consider it a vacancy and it be a joint appointment between the Board of Selectmen and the Parks Commission until the next election.
So my understanding, there are 3 options, right? We can have a special election in the near future. We could wait till the next annual election next May, or we could see if we could designate these as vacancies, in which case we could appoint people with the process that's defined in the charter, which would be a joint vote of the Parks Commission and the Board of Selectmen. Am I correct in those 3 options are what we have?
Yes.
Okay. I'll turn to you, Attorney Costa. Are there legal implications on how this should be treated, or do we have kind of free reign in those 3 options?
So, Mr. Chair, I think that there are certainly preferred options. I would say that of the 3 options that you just outlined, which is an accurate recap of the discussions I've had with Madam Town Manager, I think that options 1 and 2 are the safest of the options, no question, either a special election or waiting until the next annual election. Those are the 2 options that undoubtedly are consistent with Mass General laws, consistent with what the charter calls for, in as much as these are elected positions. But that, of course, means one of 2 things. Either you fund a special election, or these 2 additional seats remain vacant until such time as the annual election. And if neither of those 2 things are palatable to the selectmen and to the town, you do have option 3. Option 3 requires a I don't want to call it a loose reading of the charter provisions, but requires some interpretation of the charter provisions, because what we'd be relying upon is section 3-1F of the charter, both the old version and the new version, that this provision concerning what's called the filling of vacancies hasn't changed. And subsection 2 of that section 3-1F speaks to filling vacancies in multiple member bodies. And it begins by saying, if there's a failure to elect, or if there's a vacancy, if a vacancy occurs in the membership of any elected multiple member body, and then it goes on from there to describe the process that you just described. That position or those positions are filled by the Board of Selectmen in conjunction with the remaining members of that body by joint vote. So the question then becomes, okay, so has there been a failure to elect, or has there been a vacancy? And interestingly, I've gotten two variations of this same question. One in connection with an elected board, your Parks Commission, and one in another community with respect to an appointed board, not new members of that board, but a situation concerning annual appointments and the fact that there is a vacancy that exists due to failure to reappoint. And I think that the two circumstances are different. I think that if we were dealing with an appointed body, if we were dealing with the end of a term, the law is clear in Massachusetts that at the end of a term, an individual holds over until such time as his or her successor is appointed. And so there's technically no vacancy that occurs in that position until such time as a successor is appointed. In this circumstance, we have a board that has consistently been a 3-member board. It's only now a 5-member board because of the charter amendment that now creates 2 additional seats. So I think an argument can be made that there has been a failure to elect, not by virtue of a mistake made. There has been a failure to elect because there has simply not been an election, because at the time of the last election, these positions didn't exist. Or alternatively, an argument can be made that there is a vacancy that has occurred, maybe not in the way that term is most typically used, meaning a vacancy that occurs because of a resignation or a relocation from town or a death or one of these circumstances that often results in a midterm vacancy, but a vacancy in the true sense of the word, that the seat is vacant. So I think an argument can be made under section 3-1 that this position can be filled. You have to query who would challenge it. I guess that's another, whenever you're talking about an interpretation and one that's not black and white, you concern yourself with, okay, well, what if there were to be a challenge? Would it hold up? And I guess the question becomes, to what extent do we think there would actually be a challenge? But that's sort of a judgment call for your board. I do think a straight face argument can be made, a good faith argument can be made that under section 3-1, this position can be filled through a temporary appointment, but the safer course would be an election.
Okay, so with that, I open it up to the board to weigh in on how they see it. Ms. Adams?
So we'd have to have a special election. Can we run this through the upcoming election, or is there not time for that?
No, well, you can't run town elections the same ballot as a state election.
Okay, okay, thank you.
And that is correct, Adam, right? Yeah.
That's correct.
The question I would pose, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You could not have it at the same time as the presidential election in November.
Right.
You would have to find another time to hold a special election between now and year end, or after the year, or you could await the annual town election next year.
Yeah. So the question I have is twofold. First of all, because the charter is now changed and we've created 2 more elected positions, there is certainly the understanding that they would be elected, at least from the outset, that they'd be elected. And then what happens after that to keep the body going is what that clause of 3F is about that our town council read. The other thing is, I mean, it's in my understanding, we have a full complement of park commission, so we have 3. I don't see, personally, I don't see a pressing issue why we would need to fill the 2 seats with a special election now. I don't know what the pressing issue is. They have a quorum, they have a full board, they have a full commission, I meant, and I guess I just don't understand what the urgency would be. We've had how many years of a 3-member commission? And why would all of this? I certainly am against the special election, and there's no reason to spend any money on a special election for these 2 positions. I don't understand why we wouldn't or couldn't wait till May, because I don't understand what the urgency would be for the business they have in front of them. That's my own personal opinion. Be more than happy to listen to anybody else from the board, their perspective.
I imagine that Mr. Passios is going to have some thoughts on this. So I know that he's been pushing for this change recently. I'm open to hearing what Mr. Passios has to say before I weigh in.
Anybody else from the board have any comment?
Sure. I'll offer my opinion, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. I think if they can continue to function with the 3 members and that constitutes a quorum, I don't see any reason to have a special election. I would be open if the existing commissioners felt strongly about making an interim appointment until the next regular election. I'd be open to that, but if they're not, then I'd let them proceed as a 3-member board until the next election.
You brought up something very interesting, and to you, Mr. Costa, I have a question. Now that the charter is changed and it is a 5-member board, does the quorum automatically change now? Do they have to have all 3 members who are currently seated to make a quorum? That would weigh into my decision.
So to your question, Mr. Chair, that depends upon how you interpret the definition of quorum. And that's, interestingly, a definition that was changed through the charter review process. The language is language that was chosen early on by the Charter Review Committee. It's not the exact language that I think I had proposed during one of my early reviews of the charter revisions, although I was not a participant in that process at every session of the various meetings that committee had. But the language that is currently in the charter, the new version, the amended charter, is that a quorum is a simple majority of the entire authorized complement of a multiple member body. And so the way that I read that, I think what was intended, and certainly anybody that's a participant in this meeting that was more frequently involved in those committee meetings, they can speak to this. I invite them to correct me. But the way that I read that phrase, the new phrase, entire authorized complement, is meant to be clear that it's whatever the charter authorizes as the composition of the board or the public body. So if it authorizes 5 members, that's the entire authorized complement of the public body. So a quorum then would be 3, a simple majority. So you would need to have all 3 members present to constitute a quorum. You could still conduct business with a simple majority vote amongst those 3 individuals, because majority vote is still defined as a majority of those members who are present and voting, unless there's a law that provides otherwise. And generally there's not with respect to parks commissions. So a 2-to-1 vote would still adopt a measure, even though you only have 2 members voting in favor out of a potential 5-member board. If you've only got 3 seated members, a 2-to-1 vote could pass a measure. But as I understand the new definition of the term quorum, you would need 3 members to constitute a quorum, essentially all 3 seated members.
So it would put them, so the fact that this is now signed by no work of anybody now puts them at a disadvantage because they cannot have any absences at their meeting now.
That is how I read the language in the charter. That's correct.
Certainly changed my position on what we need to do, because certainly they shouldn't be penalized with a quorum definition because of that. So.
Well, I think it presents a question, Mr. Chair, of how often the Parks Commission meets with only 2 members.
Well, I guess we could ask Mr. Passios in a second, but how many times they do is, I don't know how relevant that is. Even if they did it once, the fact is they can do it. And if they were able to operate with 2 now until next election, that would be fine with me. Then I wouldn't have any pressing need to put an appointment in. But if they can't now, where they used to in the past, or they could in the past, that changes the dynamic to me. Mr. Passios. I guess I have to unmute you, yes.
He's frozen.
Wow, he's having issues too. Mr. Passios, let's try that again. There you go.
Yeah, sorry about that. The internet's dropping out every 2 minutes here all of a sudden.
I'll talk fast then.
Yep, Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. If it drops out again, I'll try to call in. I've been authorized by the chair of the Parks Commission to represent the Parks Commission this evening. So I am speaking as the vice chair of the Parks Commission. A couple of the issues, I missed part of your discussion about the quorum. I'm assuming that with the change, our quorum has now become 3, but I didn't catch most of that.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Yeah, okay. So that's definitely an issue. As a 3-member board, one of our biggest challenges is that none of us can communicate between each of us. No 2 commissioners can talk and discuss and work on projects for the commission because of open meeting law with a 3-board commission. We are embarking on a master planning project for Marshall Park and all of the park's properties. We need the additional 2 bodies for that work and to be able to work in subsets of 2 to move that process forward. So that is our reason. And the increase to 5 from the start, way back when the charter was being reviewed, the initial reason was because the 3-member board could not communicate between each member outside of a scheduled meeting.
Okay.
If there's any other questions that I missed, I'm happy to answer them.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Passios, or anybody have any further weigh-ins about the difference between special election, annual election, or appointment?
Yeah, I'm in support of this being there not being a special election for this. This being added for the annual election next spring, but for the commission to be able to, or for anyone for it to be posted as a vacancy and for people to be appointed to it until the next election.
So you're for option 3, which is appointment in the interim till next election. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Anybody else? Ms. Marino, Mr. Dwyer, Ms. Adams?
I think going through an appointment process makes sense to me. I mean, if we had a vacancy on another elected board, that's the process we would take. And so, I mean, I think unless we can build a state because they took forever to approve the charter, I wouldn't feel comfortable spending money on a special election for this. But I think because the intent of the charter and the intent of people at town meeting was for there to be 5 members, I wouldn't want to delay providing what has already been so delayed. So I think getting it to a 5-member board with a path of least resistance makes sense.
Okay. Mr. Dwyer?
I agree with Mr. Jeffrey's sentiment. I'd support appointment, interim appointment until the next regular election next May.
Okay. Mr. Marino?
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that.
All right, I entertain a motion that we do that, and then if it passes, which it certainly my Kreskin hat on, I think it will pass. Then we would ask the town manager to advertise the role for the required amount of time, and then set up appointments sometime at the end of this month, interviews. So I would entertain a motion regarding this.
All right, I move to authorize the town manager to post 2 vacancies for the Parks Commission, and to add and for there to be an election for those positions
Well, you don't have to add that. That they're going to be in. That's by it's going to be elected in annual anyway.
So then I move to authorize the town manager to post vacancies, 2 vacancies for the Parks Commission.
For appointment. Okay.
For appointment.
Yeah. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Adams.
Just to clarify, joint appointment with BOS and Parks.
Between the select board now we are called, and I get to use that first for the first time. Select board and Parks, yes.
Okay. So are you roll calling us?
Yes, roll call.
Aye.
Ms. Adams, aye. Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Marino.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
And aye for me. Okay, so we will post that and with the appropriate amount of time, and then we'll get whatever talent bank forms we get, and then do the interviews.
Thank you very much, everybody. I have just one very quick comment, and then I'm done for the night. And that is that we need to sort out the terms, not for the appointments, but when we get to the elections, we're going to make sure that the length of terms are figured out, because we come under the rotation of a 3-year term and a 5-member board. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Current business, vote on fall special town meeting date, opening and closing of warrants to submit articles, and the safety plan to conduct the meeting. Madam Town Manager.
Yes. So in your Google Drive is a proposed schedule. So with a date of November 17th, Tuesday, November 17th, for a special town meeting. And what I did is I pulled different officials, including the town clerk, the town moderator, the finance director, as well as the school, to make sure that the auditorium was available on that date as well. And so that everyone agreed on that date, as well as, I'm sorry, the Board of Assessors as well, to make sure we'd have sufficient time for our certified free cash number and new growth. So the proposal is to open the warrant today and to close the warrant on Tuesday, close the warrant on Tuesday, September 29th at 5 p.m.
Ms. Adams, you have a question or a comment?
Sure. I wanted to ask about, and like I'm comfortable with that date and, you know, my own reasons, but if Monday the 16th was considered, with the school model that they set up now, the school building is closed to students on Mondays. And everybody is approaching all this with a different mindset. Like I said, I'd be comfortable with Tuesdays out of respect for people who are still highly concerned about the way people are moving around. Is there any reason not to do it on Monday the 16th? So it's its own individual event, so to speak?
It was just following consistency with previous years where we've held the special town meeting on a Tuesday night.
Because I know they have all these deep cleaning and everybody's so concerned. So if we're all there on Tuesday night, does it change the way janitors and everybody has to respond? I don't know. It's just, I just thought, okay, the building's closed on Mondays. Would that be a good day for us to get in there and use it? But
when I did reach out to the school as far as the date, there were no concerns brought that the auditorium would not be in use at all. So that wasn't a concern brought to me.
I see that you have the warrant open today. Is that because of timeline? Does it have to open today? Because today
No, it can open tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just for that sake, I would probably just venture that whenever we make this motion, that we change it to tomorrow, since it.
I'm not careful, it'll be tomorrow by the time we get there.
So I think by the time we finalize this meeting, it may be tomorrow. So.
I hope not.
You never know, Jim. Does anybody have any questions about this timeline? Or otherwise, if we don't, then I would entertain a motion regarding the acceptance of this timeline with that amendment that I put in.
Sure. I move. Oh,
Okay.
Go ahead, Michael.
all right. I move to accept the timeline for the special town meeting with the modification that the warrant will open on Wednesday, September the 2nd.
Do I have a
I'll
second?
second that.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Ms. Adams,
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer,
Aye.
Mr. Marino,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries,
Aye.
and aye for me. Madam Town Manager, do we need a town council here? I mean, I know he's enthralled by all of our proceedings, but do we have any other agenda items so we don't keep him?
Adam, did you want to stick around for anything? So now the date's set. You put that on your calendar.
I just did. I was half paying attention because I was typing it into my calendar. So it's in my calendar. I'm happy to stick around for the remainder of the meeting if there's anything else on the agenda that I needed for. Up to you.
Well, I mean, you're always welcome to stay. I just didn't want to hold you if there was a specific agenda item that.
You do have the naming of that brook.
Yeah.
I have no comment on that.
That's very well said, by the way. All right, so
Thank you.
feel free to listen in. Discussion on FY 2021 budget and special town meeting articles that amend the FY 21 appropriations. Floor is
Mr.
yours.
Chairman, can we go back to number 1 under current business and talk about the
safety plan. Safety
safety
plan.
plan.
I'm sorry. Yes, I apologize.
And I discussed this in a previous town manager report, just so we could have sufficient time to discuss it and put it in the warrant that will be mailed out as far as what the safety plan will be. I think as much advance notice to the public as possible is worthwhile.
Yeah. So we all have that document. Is this exactly the document we use for the annual town meeting?
Yes.
So the only comment I would have is I believe from the personal responses I got from people who did not attend is that they were concerned it did not happen this way, but people were concerned that other people would not be wearing masks and they were not required. So one of the things I brought forward at the last time when we built these precautions is that we have a separate room for people who are not going to wear a mask, that we have a microphone and we have a video so they can follow all the proceedings and interact in all the proceedings, but that there would be a special place for people who, if they did, for whatever reason they chose, did not want to wear a mask. That's the only change I would make. I don't know how the board feels.
Or could not.
Right. Well, right. For whatever reason, I said, I'm not, it's not a criticism. It's not a judgment. If people are not going to wear a mask for whatever reason, that they would be in another room, again, with full access to the whole meeting with video. And obviously the IT director would have to make sure that there's video and microphone, and we'd have to work with the town moderator so he could recognize people in the other room.
Mr. Chair, I agree with that request to modify. I would also add that this just probably organizationally, one of the challenges I think at the last meeting for us was getting off the stage to go to the restroom. That typically there's bathrooms made available behind the stage, and this time around they were all blocked off. And I recall having to find some equipment and chairs and trying to, regardless, if we can just revisit that process as well, so that way we can leave and come back. That'd be helpful.
Okay.
We'll just put a porta potty on the stage for you, Mike.
Always the practical person.
That's okay with me too.
So otherwise, I think all the other procedures we had and all the spacing and everything, I thought it worked incredibly well in May. So
One of the challenges was audio in the gym. So, in other words, we would probably separate the non-mask people, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, just a heads up so they get working on that ahead of time.
Right.
They did set up for the annual instead of using the gym too, because we found the daylight, we couldn't, you weren't able to see the screen, was to set it up in the
Cafeteria.
And actually we didn't utilize that at all, but you could see, you could hear, everything worked out well. And
Oh, good. Okay, so then that should be easy to implement, I would say. That's the only change I would look for. And then, as Michael said, we want to make sure that people at the very beginning, at the entrance, they knew which bathrooms were operating and how to get there, so they weren't wandering the building looking for an open bathroom.
Okay.
I think Michael missed 3 articles in that meeting because he was just wandering the halls. So. Do you need anything else? Are you going to write that in and bring it back for approval next week?
I can do that.
Okay. Okay, now do you want to discuss your budget?
Yes, so this is going to be very brief because I prefer to table this till next week.
Well, we can if you want. We can table it in total if you want.
Okay.
All right. Let's table it for next week. All right. Vote on naming of tributary off of Mulpris Brook as Baelish Brook. So I don't know. Did everybody should have seen the email that we got from the USGS requesting this? Is everybody not familiar with what we're being asked?
I'm familiar. Is Mr. not Baelish, but is the resident of Lunenburg with us tonight?
I don't know. None of the named people, but if anybody on the phone is the one presenting this to the USGS regarding this tributary of the Mulpris Brook, please let me know by raising your hand there. For those that don't know, I'm going to just read the email into the record. I'll do this quickly. It was addressed to me, and it says, the U.S. Board on Geographic Names, the BGN, has received a proposal from a resident of Lunenburg to apply the new name Baelish Brook to an officially unnamed stream that flows into the Mulpris Brook in the Cowdrey Nature Center. The BGN is responsible by law for standardizing geographic names for use by the federal government and accepts proposals to name unnamed geographic features or change the names of already named geographic features. Because the BGN places importance on local opinion when it votes on these proposals, the staff asked for input from local governments who are elected to represent its citizens who might have an interest. The stream currently has no name that is official for federal use. Please see the attached proposal packet for the details. The proponent wishes to honor his great uncle, Harry Baelish, who was lived from 1915 to 1980, who was born in Pennsylvania and died in Oregon. Mr. Baelish has no connection to Lunenburg or Massachusetts. He had a long military career serving in World War II and the Korean War and was stationed in New Mexico, San Francisco, Germany, and Turkey. The proponent acknowledged that Mr. Baelish has no connection to the area, but believes that he should be commemorated for his military service. Please see the attached BGN commemorative names policy, and please consider the proposal in light of the policy. We would like to know whether your office supports or opposes the proposal to officially name Baelish Brook. We ask that you coordinate your response with the Lunenburg Conservation Commission, who are copied on this email. We would also be asking for a recommendation for the Massachusetts States Names Authority. Federally recognized tribes will also have an opportunity to provide comments. And then they give links to the proposal. There's no deadline, but they ask for our consideration and to, when we do take a vote, that we respond to them what our vote was. At the last Conservation Commission meeting, I think this is also in our Google Drive, the Conservation Commission voted unanimously to recommend that the brook at the Cowdrey not be named after Mr. Baelish. The commission is in admiration of his service in World War II. However, as there is no connection to the town of Lunenburg, the commission would rather see this type of action reserved for someone who has local historical roots. So that is what they voted on. It now comes before us for our opinion. And with that, I would open it up to discussion. I will say that for one, even before it went to the Conservation Commission, notwithstanding the gentleman's service to the country in World War II and other places that he was stationed, I do concur with the Conservation Commission's decision that I would prefer, this is allowed under the commemorative name policy to name it for somebody who's not tied to it, but I would prefer, as they mentioned, that we choose somebody who has more local roots, hopefully in the conservation arena even, but at least more local roots. Ms. Adams. Ms. Adams. Oh, sorry, you muted yourself. Okay, hold on. There you go.
Primarily raised my hand so I could unmute.
Oh, okay.
Contribution would be, I love alliteration, so it sounds good.
All right. Mr. Jeffrey.
But I really see where conservation came from. It's and I always get into that setting precedent thing, and I think when we're naming something, even if this were to be an option down the road, it opens up an opportunity for more conversation and more reflection on bestowing a name to a geographical location. So, like, I guess I wouldn't be prepared to do a name without us sort of looking at this as a broader topic. It might be fun to name some extra things in town. It's a good idea.
Well, I think there's certain criteria that have to be met too. You can't just go around naming stuff, but yeah, this one certainly has.
Of course, within the parameters of the rules, Tom, but.
Mr. Jeffries.
Yeah, I think that the Conservation Commission made the right call. I think the service is certainly commendable, you know, but I think that before I'm a little surprised that the resident didn't come before any board that I'm aware of. I don't think most people know that you can even do this. So it kind of surprised me a bit, but
yeah,
I'm not in favor.
I was surprised when I received it. I'm like, I've never, in all my years serving with the town, I've never had this kind of request. I don't think people, I thought every brook and tributary was named by this point, since we've been inhabited almost 300 years in Lunenburg, but I guess, you know, I guess that's not true.
So someone was clearly aware that you can do this and was looking for something and found it. But I think that if we name, I'm not really a big fan of naming anything after people, but you know, I'd much prefer a more butterfly, you know, brook or something like that. But keep the alliteration for Selectmen Adams, and but yeah, unfortunately, I'm gonna be a no for this one. I'll wait to hear from Mr. Marino, but I'm happy to make the motion on this.
I agree with all of you. His service is very admirable, but without the connection, I read the policy. It's really, I think, relies heavily upon some kind of connection with the community, and there just is none. So I agree with you.
Okay, Mr. Dwyer.
Just reiterate what everyone said. As a member of the Conservation Commission, we felt similarly that with no real notable connection to the future or the region, that it wasn't appropriate. So I'd be a no.
So I would ask somebody to not belabor this, and we just take a vote.
I move to not recommend the naming of this brook to be Baelish or Balish Brook.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Adams.
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Marino.
Aye.
And an aye from me. Mr. Jeffries, sorry.
Aye.
And an aye from me. Okay, and we will, can we submit to Mr. O'Connell our decision from both boards then, Madam Town Manager?
Sorry.
Oh, we got you in a daze there.
Yeah, I was reading something.
So can we voted to recommend that it not be named in basically.
And we'll follow up according to their, I think it was the contact information in there. So.
Excellent, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Approval of 2020 minutes of June 9th, 16th, 23rd, and July 7th of this year. Does anybody have any comments about them? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion regarding those 4 sets of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from June 9th, June 16th, June 23rd, and July 7th, 2020.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call. Ms. Adams?
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer?
Aye.
Mr. Marino?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
And aye for me. Last week, I signed the following warrants. The accounts payable warrant in the amount of $657,588.86. A payroll deduction warrant in the amount of $672,284.86. And a payroll warrant in the amount of $631,887.93. Any action items? Seeing none. Any committee reports?
I'm sorry, Tom. I just
Yes.
had a small thing to run by the town manager. Was just checking in if we've communicated at all with the Department of Transportation and whatnot with the bad line painting situation from the Walmart intersection approaching the gas station. I had inquired about it a while back, but then I actually think I got an email or something about a citizen asking for follow-up, because there is this stretch there where that road feels almost like one lane, and it's definitely a line painting improvement needed there.
Selectman Marino, are you aware of any update on that?
I plead the fifth. No, I'm just kidding. No, the line painting is on a schedule as far as I know. It's probably coming up soon. They typically do it, I think, annually.
And can I add spray paint as a civic duty?
Yeah, take a chance.
Every time I'm there, it feels wrong. Like yeah. So if we could just send them a reminder to that area for some reason is extremely worn out and reads as one lane when it's 2 very fast lanes usually.
I'll have the interim police chief do that because I think I wore out my welcome.
Oh.
Yet another smart decision. That's how we can tell people made the right move in appointing you to this, electing you to this body. By making those kind of smart
copies with the chief so we can go complain about such matters?
Like.
I'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Hey, by the way, are you entertaining having Thursdays coffee with the retired chief, by the way?
Maybe after COVID, people will be afraid to show up.
You'd have it as a Zoom meeting and everybody brings their own coffee.
Yeah.
All right,
we have footage.
Committee reports.
Yes, I have a committee report for the library.
Mr. Jeffries.
So the library met on August the 20th, and they had a really great meeting. I really enjoyed the way that the library members get along with one another. So a couple things came out. The first is that they noted that the post-librarian position has been posted. They wanted to extend a thanks to Julie, the assistant town manager, for all of her assistance with that. And this position is for 30 hours a week. And they just made the note that they have had some difficulty getting qualified applicants. So I'm reading through my notes here. I haven't pre-read them in the last 30 minutes, so I may stumble a little bit. So a couple of things also were noted about summer reading. That summer reading was a huge success from June 25th to July 27th, that they had 179 readers for more than 108,000 minutes, which is all students and pretty incredible. And that staff are working on a fall reading challenge that should start about September the 13th. For reopening, they wanted to also note that KIP has been very helpful, and they're awaiting additional equipment to be able to begin limited browsing. I know that today was their target date for that, and that what they're looking to do is open for 2 hours a day, have 40-minute slots, and 100 slots per week. I think that's how that worked out, but I may be totally wrong in that. But that was what they were looking for. And then that they also have vulnerable populations are eligible for designated time slots. So people who are high risk, that they are, that there will be time slots available for them. And again, that's to sign up. You have a 40-minute time slot to do some limited browsing. Books that are handled, that people touch, are quarantined, and all patrons will need to use sanitizer upon entering. They wanted to note that curbside will continue, and they will have varied schedules to better accommodate the community. And then for children, they made a couple of notes just for parents who are interested in having your children come to the library, that they've done a few things. The upholstered furniture has been placed kind of out of the way, so that way that's not going to be utilized. The games and the puzzles, that those are not available currently. And that they do have bundled material to assist remote learning or homeschooling. And so if you are homeschooling or doing any of that remote learning with your family, that you can reach out to them for some bundled material that may be assistance to you, and that they are following state requirements that anyone 2 years old or older must wear a mask when they enter. So they also, the last things is just that they're doing some great outreach through Instagram, which I think is pretty incredible, and that they're doing, as we noted, I think we all got the email, that there's also a PAC is looking to have a collaboration with them to do this kind of 9 weekly stories that PAC's going to broadcast. So certainly they wanted to promote as well, that anyone who's interested in participating in that to reach out to PAC for assistance. And as always, if you are in a generous spirit, the library is always open to friends of the Lunenburg Library receiving those donations. So please feel free, if you're in a generous spirit or have a little more means than others, to donate to support the library or the Council of Aging. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee reports?
Briefly.
Sure.
I forgot to mention a month ago that I did attend the MRPC. They had like a familiarization, sort of like a webinar, and then I attended the meeting following day. And I intend on attending the meeting this Thursday. But Heather, did you get the email on the Brownsfield money, the grant money? They have some additional grant money left over?
Yes, I did see that.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, town manager report and COVID-19 update.
Okay. Vacancies, and when I put this list together, it took into account tonight's appointments, so I'll be one off in my report. The Americans with Disabilities Act Commission has 1 vacancy. The Architectural Preservation District Commission now has 1 vacancy. The Historical Commission, with the luck of the appointment tonight, has 2 vacancies. The Senior Center Property Tax Work-Off Committee has 1 vacancy, and there's 1 associate vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals. Interested people can get an application on the town website, and completed forms can be sent to the Board of Selectmen's office. We covered the Mulpus Brook. The home rule petition for the liquor license for Lonnie Orchards, that bill, that was bill number 4644, was filed after the previous town meeting last year. This was to add an additional liquor license for Lonnie Orchards. This was signed off by the governor on August 20th. I asked the executive assistant to contact Lonnie Orchards to provide all the necessary paperwork so that they can go through the licensing procedure with the selectmen at a future date.
And have we, by the way, just if I can interrupt here, did we ever get, there was the one for Lonnie Orchards, and then there was the other one that we asked for. Has that been ruled upon? The one that we wanted in addition for the town to hold on to distribute, that was not designated for a specific business?
They never moved that forward, that bill forward, because it didn't.
Can we talk to our legislative delegation to see if we can, I mean, at least they should move it forward and tell us they're not going to do it again. I don't want to be ghosted, as the term goes these days, where they just kind of dies and you don't know why it dies.
Yes. Yeah.
Are they actually, I mean, I know that there's an election. Are they actually doing much these days? our delegation?
They're in informal session, so that's how they were able to pass the Lonnie Orchards bill and the charter. It all's informal session right now. So not as much, but okay. Moving on down. The continuity of operations plan. We had our kickoff meeting today and with all the department heads in attendance. And so the continuity operations plan is a document that ensures that our primary essential functions of the town continue to be performed during a wide range of emergencies, including localized acts of nature, accidents, technological or attack-related emergencies, or pandemics. This plan will identify such things as essential functions, orders of succession, delegations of authority, continuity of facilities, and continuity of communications. This project is funded through a grant through the Community Compact Program, and the UMass Collins Center is our consultant. We were notified on August 27th by the Department of Energy Resources that we were awarded our request of $69,361 for our Green Communities Competitive Grants. And there's a variety of projects, energy efficiency, appliance upgrades at different buildings, as well as LED lighting at the middle high school, a hot water boiler replacement at the primary school, among other things. That's included in that grant award. The fuel tank removal and replacement project, that project is currently out to bid and bids will be due on September 21st. In other meeting announcements, the Conservation Commission has a meeting on Zoom tomorrow night at 7 p.m. The school committee has a meeting tomorrow night on Zoom at 6:30 p.m. The Board of Assessors has a meeting on Zoom on Thursday at 1 p.m. And the Sewer Commission has a meeting on Zoom on Tuesday, September 8th at 5 p.m. Any questions?
Any questions for the town manager on the report? Okay, on to the COVID-19 updates.
Yeah, I'll try to keep this brief too. The Board of Health issued their weekly update, and as of August 28th, there are 77 confirmed positive cases in Lunenburg and 1 death. Town buildings, excluding the library and Eagle House, were currently open to the public from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. and by appointment outside of those hours. The Council on Aging has a variety of in-person programs going, and reservations are required for most of these programs. Mondays are weekly reservation days and can be made by calling 978-582-4166 to sign up for that week's events. Once per month programs can be reserved at any time, and all COVID-19 protocols will be followed for indoor activities, including wearing a mask and having temperatures taken. Starting in September, they will be holding some events under the tent, as they call it. On September 11th at 1 p.m., there will be a Sea Songs and Stories. And on September 25th at 1 p.m., there will be live music with Dan Kirawak. Starting, as Selectman Jeffries indicated, starting today, the Lunenburg Library will be open for limited browsing by appointment only. And so as Selectman Jeffries stated, patrons can reserve slots. And what I read in their newsletter was 30-minute slots for browsing in the library. Reservations can be made by going through their website calendar at lunenburglibrary.org. For state updates, as of August 27th, August 27th, there were 117,450 COVID-19 cases, 8,777 deaths, and 1,649,836 patients have been tested to date. We're currently still in step 1 of phase 3. On August 19th, the state public health officials announced that there would be a mandatory flu immunization required for all children 6 months of age or older who are attending Massachusetts childcare, preschool, kindergarten, K through 12, and colleges and universities. And they must receive the vaccine by December 31st, unless there is a medical or religious exemption provided. Also exempted are K through 12 students who are homeschooling and higher ed students who are completely off campus engaged in remote learning only. This requirement is to enter school in January as an addition to existing vaccine requirements for all those attending childcare, preschool, K through 12, colleges and universities in Massachusetts. And add on to that, elementary and secondary students in districts and schools that are using a remote education model are not exempt. Executive order to increase childcare options. The governor issued an executive order to increase childcare options for families with students in hybrid or remote learning when schools reopen in September, some of which adds a new municipal responsibility to inspect and approve remote learning enrichment programs. There are 3 different options. I won't read through all 3. This will be up on the website and on Facebook, but one of those options, which nothing has been provided as far as guidance on how towns, what our responsibility in licensing those care options. So more to come on that. And additional free sites for testing have been added. So right now there are 21 free sites in high-risk communities that are eligible for all Massachusetts residents to go get tested there as well for free. And that can be found through mass.gov/info-details/stop-the-spread. That's all I have for tonight.
Excellent. Any questions about that from anybody? Okay, upcoming meetings. So we have a meeting next Tuesday, September 8th, day after Labor Day. And we have one on the 15th and the 22nd to round out the month. Any public comment from the public? Seeing no. Oh, let's see if we can do this with the person on the phone. I'm not able to unmute people on the phone. So
He's video.
What?
He's on video still.
No, that's Dave. There was somebody else who did it.
Oh.
Dave, are you muted on your end? There you go.
Yeah, I guess I was. Sorry about that. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. Honestly, Michael, if I'm repeating something, I apologize from the TC Passios committee. But I just wanted to remind the public that especially at our next 2 meetings, if not beyond, our agenda item for community groups or organizations to come before us to express their possible needs in any form in the TC Passios building as we start working on placement of offices and trying to splice up the building. So we're just want to keep that out in front of the public that you are welcome to attend our meetings. And I had the dates here. The next 2 meetings are September 10th and September 21st. Thank you.
And to add, those meetings are at 6 p.m.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, thank you. And any public comment from the board?
Thank you.
Your hand up. Just speak. Just speak from the board if you have any comments. No.
I thank Mr. Passios for that comment. So important. If you have any organizations in town, again, September the 10th, September the 21st, 6 p.m.
Thank you. Okay. I think we have covered all the orders of business. To review what's getting moved to next week. We're going to have the finance director's fourth quarter financial report from 2020 because we had technical issues. Hopefully we can reschedule for the historical commission talent bank submission from Kevin Bosom, and the town manager's FY21 budget and special town meeting articles that amend the FY21 budget appropriations, her outlook and overview of that, what she sees happening from there. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second. All right, roll call. Ms. Adams.
Aye.
Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Marino.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
And aye for me. Good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.